The day I pried up a loose floorboard in the little lakeside cabin my husband had always called his, I expected to find old mice nests or forgotten tools. Instead, I uncovered a faded receipt wrapped in wax paper, still bearing my name from before I was married. My hands started shaking before I even finished reading it. For 34 years, Robert had sworn that cabin belonged to him, but someone had buried the one piece of paper that proved he had been lying to me almost our entire marriage. If you've ever felt that quiet voice inside you whisper something wasn't right long before you had proof, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end of my story. Please like this video if you believe the truth has a way of surviving no matter how deeply it's buried. Subscribe if heartfelt family dramas speak to your heart. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Reading your comments reminds me that none of us has to face betrayal alone. My name is Julia Ross, and for most of my adult life, I believed that being a good wife meant keeping peace even when peace cost me pieces of myself. I was 63 years old when the truth about the cabin began to rise from the floorboards, but the story did not begin there. It began years earlier in a quiet house in New Hampshire with a husband who knew how to sound reasonable while slowly making every decision mine in name only. Robert Ross and I had been married for 34 years. To our neighbors, we looked steady, ordinary, the kind of couple people pointed to and said, "They made it work." Robert had been a building contractor before his knees gave him trouble. He was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and confident in that old-fashioned way some men have when they believe age has made them wiser than everyone else. He could shake a man's hand at church and make him feel like he had just met the most trustworthy person in town. I had been an elementary school teacher for nearly 3 decades. I taught second grade mostly. I loved children at the age when their handwriting was still crooked and their questions were still honest. When I retired, people gave me cards covered in flowers and little notes saying I had changed their lives. I kept every one of them in a blue shoebox under my bed. Robert never understood that. He thought sentimental things were clutter. "Julia, you can't save every scrap of paper," he would say, standing in the doorway, while I tucked another drawing from a former student into a folder. And I would smile because that was what I had learned to do. Smile first. Defend yourself later if there was energy left. We lived in a modest colonial house outside Concord, New Hampshire. White siding, black shutters, a maple tree in front that turned red every October. It was not fancy, but it was ours. Or at least I thought it was ours. Then there was the cabin. The cabin sat beside a narrow lake in Vermont, tucked between pine trees and old stone walls that had probably been there longer than anyone remembered. It had a small screened porch, a wood stove, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen with cabinets painted butter yellow. In the mornings, fog lifted off the water like breath from something sleeping. I loved that place before I ever knew the whole truth about it. My mother, Evelyn Bennett, loved Vermont. When I was a girl, she used to take me on weekend drives through little towns with white churches and general stores that smelled like coffee and sawdust. She always said there was something honest about old houses. They creaked when they were tired. They leaked when they were neglected. They never pretended to be stronger than they were. "Remember that, Julia," she once told me. "Houses tell the truth. People are the ones who hide." I did not know then how much I would need those words. Robert always called the cabin his, not ours. His. "My cabin needs new gutters. My cabin taxes went up again. I might head up to my cabin this weekend." At first, I barely noticed. Marriage has a way of training your ears to skip over little cuts. You tell yourself he does not mean it that way. You tell yourself some men speak in ownership because that is how their fathers spoke. You tell yourself it is easier not to correct every small thing. But small things grow roots. Whenever I asked about paperwork, Robert changed the subject. "Julia, I handled all that years ago. Don't worry your head over legal language. You hate dealing with forms anyway." That part was true. I did hate forms. I hated numbers and contracts in fine print. Robert knew that, and over time he turned my discomfort into his authority. The first time I remember feeling uneasy was maybe 20 years into our marriage. We were sitting at the kitchen table in New Hampshire sorting through bills. I had recently received the final distribution from my mother's estate. It was not a fortune, but to me it felt sacred. My mother had worked as a nurse, saved carefully, and lived simply. Every dollar carried the weight of her long shifts and quiet sacrifices. Robert told me we needed to move a large amount into a separate account for house repairs. "The roof won't wait," he said, "and the foundation work is going to be more expensive than I thought." I remember hesitating with the pen in my hand. "How much exactly?" He sighed, not loudly, but enough to make me feel childish. "Julia, I already walked you through this." Maybe he had. Maybe he had not. That was the thing about Robert. He could say something with such certainty that your own memory stepped backward. So I signed. I signed because I trusted him. I signed because he was my husband. I signed because at 50-something, I still believed that a man who ate dinner beside you every night would not quietly take what your mother left you. Years passed. The roof was repaired, yes. Some foundation work was done too. Enough that I never questioned the amount again. But the cabin changed after that. Robert became more possessive of it, more guarded. He went there alone more often. Sometimes he said he needed quiet. Sometimes he said there were maintenance issues. Sometimes he said the road was too rough for me, or the weather was not worth the drive, or the place was too dusty, or he would take me next time. Next time became next month. Next month became spring. Spring became years. When I did go, it was usually with him standing over every room like a museum guard. He watched which drawers I opened. He told me not to bother with the old desk because it was full of junk. He insisted the back bedroom had mice, though I never saw droppings. He kept one closet locked and said it held tools. Once I reached for a folder on the bookshelf and he snapped, "Leave that alone." I froze. He softened his voice immediately. "Sorry, old tax stuff. You know how I hate when papers get mixed up." But my hand stayed cold for the rest of the afternoon. That was how life with Robert worked. A sharp edge followed by a soft cloth to cover it. A command followed by a smile. A lie followed by just enough affection to make me feel guilty for noticing. Our children saw what they wanted to see. Michael, our oldest, admired his father. He worked in insurance, had 2 children of his own, and believed practical men deserved respect because they kept things running. He loved me, I know he did, but he often treated me like someone gentle who needed guidance. Sarah, our youngest, was different. She lived in Portland, Maine, worked as a librarian, and called me every Sunday evening. She noticed pauses. She heard what I did not say. More than once she asked Mom, "Are you sure Dad isn't making decisions without you?" And more than once I answered, "Your father means well." I said it so often it became less of a belief and more of a prayer. The cabin remained the one place I could not let go of emotionally. Even when Robert made me feel like a guest there, I loved it. I loved the pine smell when the door first opened. I loved the lake tapping softly against the dock. I loved the old quilt my mother had once admired during a visit years before she died. She had stood on that porch wrapped in a cardigan looking out at the water. "This is the kind of place a woman could remember herself," she said. At the time, I thought she meant the quiet. Now I wonder if she already knew something I did not. The summer before everything changed, Robert began talking about expenses more than usual. Property taxes, insurance, repairs, dock maintenance, septic inspection. Every conversation somehow circled back to how much the cabin cost him. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed to keep that place," he said one evening while we ate meatloaf in front of the television. I looked at him. "Then maybe we should go through the records together." His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "There's no need. I'd like to understand." "You wouldn't understand it, Julia." The words were quiet, but they landed hard. "Not you might find it confusing. Not I can explain later." "You wouldn't understand it?" I remember staring at the peas on my plate and feeling something inside me shift. Not break, not yet. Just shift like ice beginning to crack under snow. That night after Robert went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table and thought about my mother's inheritance. I thought about the money I had signed away. I thought about the cabin, the locked closet, the missing folders, the way Robert's voice changed whenever ownership came up. Then I opened my old checkbook box. I do not know what I expected to find. Maybe nothing, maybe reassurance, maybe proof that I was becoming suspicious over ordinary things. But buried beneath expired warranty cards and old Christmas stamps, I found a bank withdrawal slip from years earlier. The amount was larger than I remembered. Much larger. My signature was at the bottom. And in the memo line in Robert's handwriting were 3 words that made the room feel suddenly airless. Vermont Property Deposit. I sat there for a long time listening to the refrigerator hum. The house was quiet. Robert was asleep upstairs. Outside, the maple branches scratched softly against the window. For the first time in 34 years, I allowed myself to ask a question I had been too loyal, too tired, and too afraid to ask. If the cabin was truly Robert's, why had my mother's money paid for it? I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until the numbers on the microwave blurred into one another, that old withdrawal slip lying in front of me like something alive. Vermont Property Deposit. 3 simple words written in Robert's firm, slanted handwriting. 3 words that made the past rearrange itself in my mind. Every time Robert had said my cabin, every time he had told me not to worry my head over papers, every time he had made me feel foolish for asking. By morning, I had tucked the withdrawal slip inside an old cookbook my mother had given me. It was a red-checkered Better Homes and Gardens cookbook with loose pages and butter stains near the pie section. Robert never opened cookbooks. He believed recipes were for people who lacked instinct, though he had never made anything more complicated than toast. At 7:30, he came downstairs wearing his navy robe and the expression of a man who expected the world to be exactly where he left it. "You're up early," he said. "I couldn't sleep." He poured coffee without looking at me. "That's what happens when you drink tea after dinner." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that was Robert's gift. He could reduce a storm inside me to a harmless little habit. Tea, weather, age, nerves, anything except the truth. He sat across from me and opened his tablet. "There's something we need to discuss," he said. My stomach tightened. I had planned to wait, to watch, to gather more proof before asking anything. But Robert, as if some part of him sensed my mind had shifted, moved first. "The cabin is becoming too expensive to keep." I looked up slowly. He did not meet my eyes. He scrolled on his tablet as though he were reading numbers. "The taxes are ridiculous now. Insurance has gone up. Dock repairs alone could run $15,000, maybe more. It's not practical anymore." The word practical had always been one of Robert's weapons. Practical meant his way. Emotional meant mine. "What are you saying?" I asked. He finally looked at me. "I'm saying it may be time to sell." For a moment, the kitchen seemed to go quiet in a way that was bigger than silence. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard settled. "Sell the cabin," I asked. "That's what I said. But we haven't even talked about it. We're talking now." "No, Robert, you're announcing it." His mouth tightened. Just a little. Enough that I knew I had stepped outside the role he preferred for me. He set the tablet down. "Julia, don't make this sentimental. It is sentimental to me. That's exactly the problem." I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them shaking. "That cabin means something to me. You know that." "It means work to me," he said. "Bills, repairs, responsibility. I've carried that place for years." There it was again. The noble burden. The sacrifice. I thought of the withdrawal slip hidden inside my mother's cookbook and felt heat rise behind my eyes. "You carried it," I said quietly. His gaze sharpened. "What does that mean?" "It means I'd like to see the records before we make any decision." He leaned back in his chair. "Julia. Just my name." But the way he said it made me feel like a child reaching for something breakable. "I am serious," I said. "If we're discussing selling, I want to understand the ownership, the expenses, the history. All of it. You don't need to understand every line of paperwork to know when something costs too much. I need to understand enough." He stared at me for a few seconds. Then he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You've been watching too many of those widow finance videos online." I felt my face flush. "This has nothing to do with videos." "Then what is it? Sarah putting ideas in your head again?" "No. Because your daughter has always enjoyed questioning me from a distance while contributing nothing. That is not fair. What isn't fair is me spending decades maintaining a property only to be treated like I'm stealing something because I'm trying to make a sound decision." The old Julia would have apologized. She would have softened the room, reassured him, made lunch change the subject. But the old Julia had not found those 3 words in Robert's handwriting. Vermont property deposit. "I'm not accusing you of stealing," I said. His eyes held mine. "Good," he said. "Because that would be a very ugly thing to suggest after everything I've done for this family." Then he stood, rinsed his coffee cup, and left the room. The conversation should have ended there, but by noon, I knew it had not ended at all. It had only moved behind my back. Robert spent most of the day in his study with the door closed. He made several phone calls. Each time I passed through the hallway, his voice dropped. Once, when I paused near the laundry basket outside the study, I heard him say, "No, she won't be an issue." My fingers tightened around the basket handle. A pause. Then, "Just keep the file clean. I don't want unnecessary complications before closing." Closing. The word struck me so hard I nearly stepped backward. Not maybe time to sell. Not something we need to discuss. Closing. That meant he had already started. Maybe he had already listed it. Maybe he had already found a buyer. And I, his wife of 34 years, had been sitting across from him at breakfast like a guest being informed the hotel was changing ownership. I carried the laundry upstairs and shut myself in the bedroom. My first instinct was to call Sarah, but I stopped with my hand on the phone. Sarah would believe me. That was not the problem. The problem was that Sarah would be angry, and anger moved fast. I needed quiet. I needed facts. So I waited. That evening, Robert said he had errands in town. He took a shower, shaved, and put on a pressed shirt, which was more effort than errands usually required. I watched him from the bedroom doorway as he fastened his watch. "Going somewhere nice?" I asked. He glanced at me through the mirror. "Just meeting someone about lumber prices. Lumber prices require cologne." His hand paused. Then he laughed once. Don't start, Julia. It was not a denial. After he left, I went into his study. I had not done that in years. Robert made that room feel like a private office in a public building, a place I was technically allowed to enter but never welcome to touch. The desk was dark oak, heavy and polished. Filing cabinets lined the wall. A framed certificate from his contracting association hung behind the chair like proof of character. The drawers were locked. Of course they were. But his wastebasket was not. I felt foolish kneeling beside it like a woman in some detective movie, digging through crumpled envelopes and receipts. There were hardware store slips, a torn bank advertisement, and a yellow sticky note folded in half. I opened it. Mark Ellison Title Company packet Friday. Diane wants final number before Robert signs. Diane. My breath caught. Diane Ross was Robert's younger sister, and if resentment had a voice, it would sound like hers. She had never forgiven me for marrying Robert, though I never understood why. She acted as if I had taken him from a kingdom instead of a 2-bedroom apartment with bad plumbing. Over the years, she made little comments at Thanksgiving and Easter. Julia never had to worry about money once she married into this family. Robert always was too generous. Some people are lucky enough to land well. I had spent decades pretending not to understand her. Now staring at her name on that sticky note, I understood too much. Diane was not just involved. Diane wanted the final number. I took a photo of the note with my phone, then put it back exactly as I had found it. My hands felt clumsy. My heartbeat was too loud. Every small sound in the house made me glance toward the door. When Robert came home, he smelled faintly of restaurant coffee and cold air. I was sitting in the living room with a blanket over my knees, pretending to watch a documentary about national parks. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Did you get your lumber prices?" He looked at me for half a second too long. "More or less." He went upstairs without another word. The next morning, I found more proof without even looking for it. Robert left his phone on the kitchen counter while he stepped outside to speak with a delivery driver. It buzzed once. I knew I should not look. I knew good wives did not read messages, but I also knew good husbands did not plan closings behind locked doors. The screen lit up. A message from Diane. "Don't let Julia see anything until after closing. Once it's done, she can cry all she wants." I stared at those words until they burned into me. Then another message appeared. "Mark says Friday still works if Robert brings the signed authorization." Signed authorization. My mouth went dry. What authorization? Signed by whom? I heard Robert's voice outside, thanking the driver. Quickly, I stepped back from the counter. The phone went dark just as he came in. He looked from me to the phone. "You okay?" he asked. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "I'm fine." He picked up the phone and slid it into his pocket. For the rest of the day, I moved through the house like a woman walking across thin ice. I made lunch, I folded towels, I answered a call from Michael and told him, yes, we were both doing fine. My voice sounded normal. That frightened me more than anything. By late afternoon, Robert announced he was going to the cabin the next morning. "Just for the day," he said. "Need to check a few things before winter." In August, he frowned. "What you said before winter?" "Preventive maintenance." "Julia, that's what responsible people do." "Responsible." There it was again. I nodded. "Do you want me to come number 2 fast?" Then he softened it. "Road's muddy from the rain. No reason for both of us to make the drive." I looked at him, this man I had shared a bed with for more than 3 decades, and suddenly I could not recognize the shape of my own marriage. Had it always been this way? Had I simply mistaken control for competence? Because it was easier than admitting the person closest to me had been quietly building walls around my life. That night, while Robert slept, I packed a small canvas bag, flashlight, phone charger, the photo of Diane's note, the withdrawal slip from the cookbook, a bottle of water, my old house keys. I did not know what I was going to find at the cabin, but I knew Robert was going there to remove something, and I knew with a certainty that made my hands stop shaking that if I waited for him to explain the truth, would disappear before I ever saw it. At 6 the next morning, Robert left in his truck. At 6:30, I got into my car and followed the road north toward Vermont. I kept 3 cars between Robert's truck and mine all the way into Vermont. It was not difficult. Robert had always driven like a man who believed speed limits were suggestions meant for other people. He moved through small towns, past white churches and gas stations and farm stands, selling corn in brown paper bags, never once checking his mirror long enough to notice the gray Subaru behind him. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I had not followed anyone in my life. Not like that. Not with my heart pounding every time his brake lights flashed. Part of me felt ridiculous, like a suspicious wife in a movie creating drama out of shadows. But another part of me, the part that had seen Diane's message and Robert's handwriting on that bank slip, knew I was not inventing anything. I was finally looking. Finally. The closer we got to the lake, the more my chest tightened. The road narrowed, curving between thick pines and old stone walls covered in moss. August sunlight flickered through the branches. Wildflowers leaned over the shoulder in yellow and purple clusters. It should have felt peaceful. That road had once made me feel like I was leaving behind every hard thing in the world. Now it felt like I was driving toward the center of a lie. About a mile from the cabin, I slowed and pulled into the small gravel lot beside an abandoned bait shop. The building had been closed for years, its sign faded, one window boarded over. Robert's truck continued ahead until it disappeared around the curve. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. My phone sat in the cup holder, Sarah's name bright on the screen from where I had almost called her twice. I did not press it. Not yet. I did not want to hear fear in her voice. I did not want to borrow courage from my daughter before I had used my own. At last, I started the car again and drove slowly toward the cabin. Robert's truck was not in the driveway. That surprised me so sharply, I almost missed the turn. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow lane, half hidden behind birch and pine. The gravel space beside it was empty. No truck, no Robert, no sound except leaves moving and lake water touching the shore. For a moment, I wondered if he had gone somewhere else first. Maybe to meet Mark Ellison, maybe to Diane, maybe to the town office, or maybe he had already come and gone. I parked beneath the pine tree near the old woodpile. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, and sadder somehow, its brown siding weathered gray in patches, its porch screen sagging near one corner. The flower boxes under the windows were empty. I used to plant red geraniums there every June. Robert had told me not to bother anymore because no one came often enough to water them. No one, as if I had chosen to stay away. I got out of the car and stood still listening. A woodpecker tapped somewhere deep in the trees. The lake flashed silver through the branches. The air smelled of pine needles, damp earth, and old wood warmed by sun. I walked up the porch steps. The third step creaked under my foot, the same creak it had made for 20 years. My mother used to say that step announced visitors better than any doorbell. I could almost see her there sitting in the old wicker chair, her cardigan pulled close, her face turned toward the water. This is the kind of place a woman could remember herself. My throat tightened. I unlocked the door with the key I had kept on my ring all these years, the key Robert probably forgot I still had. For a second it resisted. Then the lock turned. The cabin opened with a long wooden sigh. Inside, the air was stale and warm. Dust floated in the light, falling through the front windows. The living room looked familiar at first glance, faded braided rug stone fireplace, plaid couch, small bookshelf near the window. But the longer I stood there, the more I noticed what was missing. My mother's blue ceramic bowl was gone from the mantel. The framed photograph of the lake in winter was gone from the wall. The quilt that used to hang over the back of the rocking chair was gone too. I walked slowly to the mantel, touched the pale rectangle in the dust where the bowl had sat, and felt a strange coldness settle through me. Robert had been removing things. Not cleaning, not maintaining, removing. I went to the bookshelf. The lower shelf used to hold old albums, cabin manuals, maps, and a green folder labeled Vermont. The folder was gone. The albums were gone. Only a stack of outdated fishing magazines remained, though Robert had never cared for fishing unless someone was watching him do it. In the kitchen, 2 drawers were nearly empty. The old tin box of spare keys had vanished. So had the envelope where I once kept receipts from small repairs curtains, porch paint replacement screens, a new kettle. Meaningless things I had thought, but now I wondered if meaningless things had been evidence too. The cabin felt stripped not of furniture but of memory. I moved toward the back hallway. There were 2 bedrooms, the larger one Robert claimed as ours, and the smaller one where my mother had slept during her last visit. I went to the small bedroom first. The door was partly open. The room smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Sunlight crossed the narrow bed. The white dresser stood against the wall, but its drawers were pulled slightly uneven, as if someone had searched them in a hurry. I opened them one by one, empty. Even the lavender sachets my mother had tucked there were gone. On the wall above the bed, a nail remained where her little watercolor of Lake Champlain had hung. Gone. I pressed my hand to the dresser. A grief rose in me that was sharper than suspicion. Robert was not just hiding paperwork. He was erasing traces of my mother. He was clearing the cabin of anything that tied it to me before someone else walked through and believed whatever story he told. I whispered, "What did you do?" The cabin did not answer. Then I heard it. A soft sound. Not outside, not an animal, not the wind, a hollow little shift beneath my foot. I looked down. The floorboards in that room were old pine, uneven in places with dark lines between them. Near the foot of the bed, one board sat slightly higher than the others. I stepped back, then pressed my shoe against it again. A dull, hollow knock. My heart began to pound. I crouched, ignoring the stiffness in my knees. The board had been pried up before. I could see it now, the faint marks along the edge, the tiny gaps where the nails did not sit flush. Someone had lifted it, then replaced it carefully enough for a trusting person not to notice, but not carefully enough for a desperate woman. I remembered my mother's voice so clearly then that I nearly turned around. Old houses keep secrets where proud men never look. She had said it once when I was a teenager, helping her clean out my grandmother's attic. I had laughed then, asking where humble women should look. She had tapped the floor with the toe of her shoe and smiled. Down usually. Men like high shelves and locked desks. Women know to check under things. I looked around the small bedroom and found a screwdriver in the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Not Robert's good tools, just an old flathead with a cracked yellow handle. My hand shook as I slid it into the gap beside the raised board. At first, nothing happened. I pressed harder. The wood groaned. I stopped listening for a vehicle outside. Nothing. Only the lake. Only the trees. Only my own breathing, quick and shallow. I tried again. This time, the board lifted with a soft pop that sounded unbearably loud in the empty room. Beneath it was a narrow, dark space between the joists lined with dust and cobwebs. For one terrible second, I thought it was empty. Then, my flashlight beam caught something metal. A tin. Round, flat, and rusted around the rim, I reached down slowly and pulled it out. It was an old cookie tin, the kind people used to save sewing buttons or Christmas cards. The pattern on the lid had faded, but I could still make out red poinsettias and gold trim. Around it was a piece of muslin cloth tied with string yellowed with age. My hands went cold. Not because I knew what was inside, because I knew someone had wanted it hidden badly enough to bury it under the floor. I sat back on my heels and stared at the tin in my lap. Dust streaked my cardigan. My knees hurt. My breath caught in my throat. Somewhere in the distance, a truck engine passed on the road, then faded. I should have opened it immediately. Instead, I held it for a long moment and thought of Robert's locked drawers, Diane's message, Mark Ellison's packet, and every time my husband had said his cabin with that calm, certain voice. Then I untied the string. The cloth fell away. The lid resisted, sealed by years of dust and neglect. I worked my fingers under the edge and twisted until it gave with a small metallic gasp. Inside were folded papers, a faded envelope, a bank copy, and on top of everything wrapped in wax paper as if someone had known paper could outlive a liar was a yellowed receipt. My name was visible before I even unfolded it. Not Julia Ross. Julia Bennett. The name I had carried before Robert. The name my mother had given me. The name my husband had tried to bury beneath a floorboard. For a few seconds, I could not unfold the receipt. I just sat there on the dusty floor of that little back bedroom, holding the wax paper in both hands, while my old name stared up at me like a voice from another life. Julia Bennett. Before Robert. Before Ross. Before 34 years of being corrected, managed, softened, dismissed. Before I learned to say it's fine when something inside me was not fine at all. My maiden name looked almost strange to me now, as if it belonged to a younger woman I had once known and slowly misplaced. But it was mine. And there it was, written across the top of a receipt Robert had spent years keeping buried under the floor. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed and thin, with creases so deep I feared it might tear. At the top was the name of a real estate office in Vermont. Beneath it was an address I recognized immediately, the cabin's address, right down to the old rural route number it had before the county changed the system. My eyes moved line by line. Deposit received from Julia Bennett Ross. Purchase property, lakeside cabin and surrounding parcel. Payment method, certified bank transfer. And then the amount. I stopped breathing. It matched the withdrawal slip I had found in my old checkbook box. Not close. Exact. The money Robert had told me was for roof repairs and foundation work had not gone to our house in New Hampshire. At least, not all of it. A large part of my mother's inheritance had gone straight into the cabin he had called his. The cabin he was now trying to sell. The cabin Diane wanted to buy before I saw the file. I pressed one hand against my chest as though I could hold my heart in place. Inside the tin beneath the receipt was a bank copy folded into thirds. I opened it and saw my mother's name first. Evelyn Bennett Estate Account. My throat tightened so quickly I had to close my eyes. My mother had not left me a large fortune. She left me safety. That was how she had described it once, months before she died, when the cancer had made her hands thin but not her mind. I don't care if it buys you comfort, privacy, or one good door you can close behind you, she told me. But I want you to have something that is yours. At the time, I had cried and told her I already had a home. She had looked at me for a long moment, her tired eyes steady. A woman should have more than a home someone else can make her feel unwelcome in. I had thought she was speaking generally. She had always been practical that way. But now, sitting in the cabin with her papers in my lap, I wondered if my mother had seen what I had refused to see. The bank copy showed a transfer from the estate account into escrow for the Vermont property. My name was listed as beneficiary. Robert's name appeared only lower down beside a note authorized to deliver documents. Authorized to deliver. Not owner, not purchaser, not even co-purchaser. Only authorized to deliver documents. I laughed once, but the sound broke in the middle and turned into something close to a sob. Robert had not bought the cabin. He had carried papers. And somehow over the years, he had turned carrying papers into ownership. I reached into the tin again. The next item was an envelope, unsealed, addressed in my mother's handwriting. Julia. Just my first name. No stamp, no return address. A letter never mailed because perhaps it had never needed mailing. Perhaps she had left it here for me to find. Or perhaps someone had taken it from where it belonged and hidden it before I could read it. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the single sheet inside. My dearest Julia, if you are reading this, then I hope you are standing in the place I wanted you to have. I know you may not understand why I insisted on putting part of my estate toward this cabin instead of simply leaving everything in cash, but money can be spent quietly by people who call it family need. A place is harder to erase. I had to stop. The words blurred. I wiped my eyes with the back of my wrist and forced myself to continue. This cabin is meant to be yours, not because I distrust your marriage, but because I trust you to know one day whether you need silent shelter or simply a room where no one can tell you what you are allowed to feel. Robert helped with logistics because I was tired and he offered, but I made it clear that the purchase was for you. A sound escaped me then. Small. Wounded. Robert helped with logistics because I was tired and he offered. I could see it. Robert sitting beside my mother's hospital bed, kind voice-capable hands promising to handle things so I would not be burdened. My mother exhausted from treatment, trusting the man her daughter loved. And me, grateful. God help me, I had been grateful. The letter continued. Keep every receipt, keep every copy. Never let anyone convince you that confusion is the same as weakness. You are gentle, Julia, but you are not helpless. I have watched you give pieces of yourself away to keep peace. I am leaving you this place so you always remember you have the right to take those pieces back. Love, Mom. I folded the letter against my heart and bent over it. For the first time since she died, I felt less like I missed my mother and more like she had reached through the years and touched my shoulder. Not with comfort, with warning. I do not know how long I stayed there. The room was warm. Dust clung to my palms. Outside, the lake moved quietly as if it had kept this secret all along and was waiting for me to catch up. Eventually, I made myself look at the remaining papers. There was a photocopy of a deed, or what appeared to be one. I was not a lawyer, but even I could tell something was wrong. My name appeared in one section. Robert's name appeared in another. There were handwritten marks near the margins initials I did not recognize and a signature that was supposed to be mine. I stared at that signature for a long time. It resembled mine the way a stranger resembles someone in bad lighting. The loops were too tall. The J leaned the wrong direction. The R in Ross was stiff and hard, nothing like the way my hand moved when I signed my name. I touched the ink with one fingertip. That is not my signature, I whispered. The room seemed to tilt around me. A receipt proved my money paid for the cabin. A bank copy proved the money came from my mother's estate. A letter proved my mother intended the cabin for me. And this strange wrong signature suggested that somewhere between purchase and control, someone had rewritten the truth. My mind tried to defend Robert one last time. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe I had signed something years ago and forgotten. Maybe stress was making the signature look different. Maybe. But Diane's text came back to me. Once it's done, she can cry all she wants. No, this was not confusion. This was design. I took photos of every document one by one, making sure each page was clear. Then I placed them on the bed and took a video slowly moving from the tin to the receipt, to the letter, to the bank copy, to the deed. My voice shook as I narrated the date, the cabin address, and where I had found them. I had watched enough crime shows with Sarah to know people believed videos more than memories. When I finished, I gathered the papers carefully and placed them back in the tin. Then I stopped. Should I take everything? If Robert returned and saw the tin gone, he would know. But if I left it, he might destroy it. Fire Lake Shredder. Robert was practical. Robert was efficient. Robert knew how to make things disappear. I wrapped the papers in the muslin cloth, put them into my canvas bag, and returned the empty tin beneath the floorboard. Then I reconsidered. No. Too obvious. I pulled the tin back out, placed a few old magazine pages inside for weight, wrapped it again, and returned it to the hiding place. I lowered the board, carefully pressing it into place until it looked almost as it had before. Almost. My knees cracked as I stood. I moved through the cabin once more, seeing everything differently now. The yellow kitchen cabinets were not just charming. They were mine. The porch screen Robert never fixed was not his neglected responsibility. It was my neglected right. The lake outside was not the view from his cabin. It was the view my mother had tried to give me, and I had been trained to ask permission to stand in front of it. I was in the hallway when I heard tires on gravel. My blood went cold. Through the front window, I saw Robert's truck pulling into the driveway. For one frozen second, I could not move. Then instinct took over. I grabbed my canvas bag, hurried into the small bedroom, and looked around wildly. There was no back door, no closet deep enough to hide in. The window faced the trees, but it was painted nearly shut. The truck door slammed outside. Robert's footsteps crossed the porch. I slipped into the larger bedroom just as his key turned in the front door. The cabin opened. "Damn it," Robert muttered from the living room. He was angry, not surprised. Angry. I pressed myself against the bedroom wall, clutching the bag with my mother's letter inside. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain he would hear it. Then his phone rang. He answered sharply. "Yes, Diane, I'm here now." A pause. "No, I haven't checked yet." Another pause. "I told you if she found anything, it would be in the cabin." Evelyn was sentimental. Sentimental people hide paper like it's treasure. My legs nearly gave out. He knew. He had always known there was something here. Then Robert said the words that ended the last fragile excuse I had been holding for him. "If that receipt still exists, Julia can ruin everything." I stood in that larger bedroom with my back pressed against the wall, my canvas bag clutched to my chest, and listened to my husband admit he had been afraid of a receipt, not afraid of losing a cabin, afraid of being exposed. There is a difference. Robert was still in the living room, pacing now. I could hear the floorboards complain under his weight. "No, Diane," he said into the phone. "I know what I'm doing." A pause. "I don't care what Mark said. The title company won't dig that deep if the authorization is clean." My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. Authorization. That word again. Then Robert's voice dropped lower, but I could still hear every word. "Julia has never understood paperwork. If she starts asking questions, I'll handle her the same way I always have. The same way I always have." That sentence moved through me like cold water, because suddenly I saw my marriage from above. Not as a series of disagreements, not as one husband being practical and one wife being emotional. I saw a pattern, a system. He confused me, then called me confused. He kept records from me, then said I did not understand records. He made decisions without me, then acted wounded when I asked why. And I had called it marriage. Robert walked down the hall. I barely had time to move. The larger bedroom had a narrow closet with sliding wooden doors. One side held old blankets, a broken lamp, and 2 boxes of Christmas ornaments. I slipped inside and pulled the door almost closed, leaving a thin crack. Robert stepped into the bedroom seconds later. He was breathing hard, not from effort, but from anger. Through the crack, I saw only part of him, his khaki pants, his hand gripping the phone, the edge of his jaw. He opened drawers. He slammed the nightstand. He muttered under his breath. Then he crossed the hall into the smaller bedroom. The room where I had found the tin. I held my breath. The floorboard creaked. Another sound followed, sharper. He was prying it up. My knees weakened. If he found the empty tin, would he know immediately? Would he tear through the cabin? Would he come back to this room and search the closets? The metal lid scraped. Robert cursed. What Diane's voice was faint through the phone. "It's here," he said. "But I need to check." Silence. Then the tin opened. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Robert made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not anger. Panic. Damn it. My eyes closed. He knew. He knew the papers were gone. His footsteps came back into the hallway. I pressed myself deeper into the closet, my shoulder against a cardboard box, my breath trapped behind my teeth. "Julia," he called. My blood stopped. He said it again louder. "Julia." I did not answer. He moved into the living room, then the kitchen. A cabinet opened. The front door banged against the wall as he stepped onto the porch. "Julia." There was no love in his voice, no concern, only calculation breaking into rage. I waited until his footsteps moved outside and around the side of the cabin. Then I slipped out of the closet. My legs felt unsteady, but I moved quietly through the hallway. I did not go out the front door. Instead, I went to the kitchen window, the one above the small breakfast table. It had always stuck in humid weather. Today, by some mercy, it opened. I pushed out the screen, lowered my bag first, then climbed awkwardly through, scraping my arm on the sill. I landed in weeds beside the cabin and crouched there, breathing hard. Robert was behind the house near the little shed. I could hear him opening it. I grabbed my bag and moved through the trees, not toward my car at first, but away from the driveway. I cut behind the woodpile, past the old stone wall, and down toward the lake path. Only when the cabin disappeared behind the pines did I turn toward the road. By the time I reached my Subaru, my lungs burned. I did not drive home immediately. I drove to the abandoned bait shop pulled behind it and parked where Robert would not see me from the road. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the phone. I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. Mom. The moment I heard her voice, I almost broke. Sarah, I whispered. I found something. Her tone changed instantly. Where are you near the cabin? Are you alone? Yes. Robert is at the cabin. I left. I'm safe. What happened? I looked at the canvas bag on the passenger seat. I found papers. A receipt, Grandma's letter, bank records, Sarah. The cabin was bought with my inheritance. There was silence on the line. Then Sarah said very carefully, Mom, listen to me. Don't go home and confront him alone. I have to go home eventually. Not alone. Not with those documents. I looked through the windshield at the faded bait shop sign swinging gently in the wind. He knows I took them. Sarah inhaled sharply. How? He found the hiding place. Another silence. Mom, go to a bank, get a safe deposit box. Right now. That was my Sarah. Calm in crisis. A librarian by profession, but in that moment she sounded like a detective, a lawyer, and the daughter I should have trusted sooner. I don't even know if banks still do that without an appointment, I said. Then go to a copy shop first. Scan everything. Email it to me, email it to yourself. Take pictures. Do not let those be the only copies. I already took photos. Good. Send them now. I sent them from the parking lot one by one, my fingers clumsy on the screen. Receipt. Bank copy. Mother's letter. Questionable deed. Video of the tin. Video of the floorboard. Sarah stayed on the line the entire time. When the last file sent, she said, Okay, now breathe. I tried. It came out like a sob. Oh, Mom. I feel so stupid, I whispered. No. I signed things. I trusted him. I let him tell me I didn't understand. Mom, he used your trust. That is not the same as you being stupid. I wanted to believe her, but shame has a stubborn voice. It tells you that betrayal is something you should have predicted. It tells you that being fooled is the same as being foolish. It tells you that if you had been stronger, smarter, louder, no one could have taken from you. But that is not always how betrayal works. Sometimes betrayal sits across from you at breakfast and asks if you want more coffee. I drove back to New Hampshire with Sarah still on speaker for the first 20 miles. She wanted to come immediately, but I told her not yet. I needed one conversation with Robert, not because I expected honesty. I no longer expected that, but because I needed to see his face when I asked. I needed to know how deep the lie went. By the time I got home, Robert's truck was already in the driveway. Of course he had beaten me there. He was waiting in the kitchen, not pacing now, not shouting, sitting calmly at the table, his hands folded as if he were the injured party and I had kept him waiting. The sight of him made something inside me go still. Where have you been? He asked. I set my purse on the counter. The canvas bag was no longer with me. I had stopped at a copy shop, scanned everything, mailed it to Sarah, and locked the originals in a temporary document storage envelope at a local bank that offered emergency notary services and secured holding. Robert's eyes moved to my empty hands. You went to the cabin, he said. It was not a question. Yes. His jaw tightened. You had no right sneaking around like that. I looked at him for a long moment. This man. This stranger wearing the face of my husband. No right, I asked. You followed me. You broke into private storage. You took documents you don't understand. There it is, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. There, what is that sentence? The one you always use when I'm closer to the truth than you want me to be. He stood. Julia, you are getting yourself worked up over old papers. Old papers with my name on them. Your name appears on many things. That doesn't mean you understand them. My mother's estate paid for that cabin. His expression changed so quickly that if I had blinked, I might have missed it. A flash of fear. Then irritation. Then control. Your mother wanted to help us. No, I said. She wanted to help me. Robert laughed, but it sounded forced. You are twisting this into something ugly. You buried the receipt under the floor. I didn't bury anything. I heard you on the phone with Diane. That landed. For the first time, he did not have an immediate answer. Then he leaned both hands on the table and lowered his voice. You need to be very careful right now. I felt the old fear rise familiar and trained, but underneath it, something stronger rose too. Are you threatening me? I am warning you, he said. You are confused, emotional, and clearly not thinking straight. If you start making accusations, Michael will need to know what's going on. My son. Our son, Robert snapped. And yes, he deserves to know his mother is digging through floorboards and imagining crimes. The cruelty of it took my breath. He was not just going to deny it, he was going to make me the problem. You would tell our children I'm losing my mind. His face softened in that practiced way I knew too well. I don't want to, but I will do what is necessary to protect this family. Protect this family. Not protect me. Never me. I looked at the man I had cooked for, prayed for, defended, and excused. I thought of my mother writing that letter with tired hands. I thought of the receipt in my maiden name. I thought of Robert telling Diane that if the receipt existed, I could ruin everything. Then I said the one thing he did not expect. Call Michael. Robert blinked. What? If you want to tell him I'm confused, call him. But when you do, I'll ask him to come here. And then I'll show him the copies. His face went pale around the mouth. For 1 second, the house was silent. Then Robert straightened, pointed a finger at me, and said, "You have no idea what you've started." I looked back at him. "Yes," I said, "I do." And for the first time in 34 years, I did not apologize for the trouble my truth was about to cause. Robert did not call Michael that night. That told me more than any confession could have. For years, he had used our children like shadows behind him. Not directly, not cruelly in a way other people would notice, but subtly. If I disagreed, he would say Michael understood practicality. If I cried, he would say Sarah was too emotional just like me. If I asked questions, he would sigh and mention how worried the children would be if they saw me getting worked up. But when I invited him to call Michael and let the truth sit in the same room with us, Robert backed away. He turned cold instead. "You're making a mistake," he said. Maybe I answered. "But it will be my mistake." His face hardened. "You sound like your mother." For once, that did not hurt me. For once, it steadied me. "Good," I said. He left the kitchen after that. He did not slam a door. Robert was too controlled for that. He simply walked upstairs and closed himself in the bedroom we had shared for most of our marriage. That night, I slept in the guest room with a chair pushed gently beneath the doorknob, not because I thought he would harm me, but because I no longer trusted the version of him I had defended for decades. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. My eyes were gritty from almost no sleep, but my mind was clear in a way it had not been for years. I made coffee dressed in navy slacks and a cream sweater and took out the folded piece of paper where I had written a name Sarah found for me. Elaine Porter, attorney at law, Concord, New Hampshire. The name had come from an old file Sarah helped me search through over the phone the night before. Elaine had been my mother's attorney years ago, back when Mom was organizing her estate after her diagnosis. I remembered her vaguely a small woman with sharp eyes, silver blonde hair, and a voice that could make even hospital administrators stand straighter. "She may be retired," Sarah had warned me. "Then I'll ask who took over her files. You should let me come with you." "Not yet," I told her. "I need to do this first." Maybe that sounded stubborn. Maybe it was. But something had changed in me when I read my mother's letter. She had not left that cabin so Sarah could rescue me. She had left it so I could remember myself. At 8:30, I called Elaine Porter's office. A receptionist answered bright and efficient. "Porter and Fields, this is Melissa." My hand tightened around the phone. "Good morning. I'm trying to reach Elaine Porter. My name is Julia Ross. My mother was Evelyn Bennett." There was a pause. Not long, but enough. "One moment, please." Soft music played for nearly a minute. I stood in my kitchen watching the maple tree move outside the window. Robert had not come downstairs. I could hear faint movement above me. A drawer opening, a floor creaking. He knew I was making calls. Let him wonder which ones. Then a different voice came on the line. "Julia Bennett." I closed my eyes. "Not Ross. Bennett." "Yes," I said softly. "It's Julia. This is Elaine Porter. I remember your mother very well." Something in my chest loosened. "I need help," I said. Elaine did not ask me to explain everything on the phone. She did not rush me and she did not dismiss me. She simply said, "Can you be here by 10? I looked upstairs. "Yes. Bring every document you have. Originals if possible. Copies if not." "And Julia?" "Yes. Do not tell your husband where you are going." I went still. She heard the silence. "I have practiced long enough to know when a woman is calling from inside a house that has stopped feeling safe," she said. Those words nearly undid me. I parked 2 blocks from her office instead of directly in front. I do not know why. Maybe I was still afraid of Robert appearing. Maybe I had spent so many years being monitored emotionally that even empty streets felt like witnesses. Porter and Fields occupied the second floor of a brick building near downtown Concord, above a small stationery store and a tax office. The stairwell smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. On the wall outside the office was a brass plaque with Elaine's name still first, though she had to be in her 70s by then. The receptionist, Melissa, greeted me kindly and led me into a corner office. Elaine Porter stood when I entered. She was older than I remembered, of course, but not diminished. Her hair was white now, cut neatly at her jaw. She wore a charcoal suit, pearl earrings, and an expression that made me feel she had already begun assembling facts before I sat down. "Julia," she said. I tried to smile. "Thank you for seeing me so quickly." "Your mother once sat in that same chair," Elaine said, nodding toward the seat across from her desk. She was very determined that day. I sat carefully. "That sounds like her." "It does." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Elaine folded her hands. "Tell me what happened." So I did. Not perfectly. Not elegantly. I started with Robert wanting to sell the cabin, then backed up to the inheritance, then jumped forward to the withdrawal slip, Diane's text, the tin, beneath the floorboard, the letter, the receipt. Robert's threat to tell Michael I was confused. My voice cracked several times, but Elaine never interrupted except to ask precise questions. Dates, names, amounts, who had access, where the originals were now. When I told her the original documents were secured at the bank and that I had scanned copies, she nodded once. Good. That one word felt like a hand on my back. I slid printed copies across the desk. Elaine put on thin reading glasses and began with the receipt. Her face did not change much, but I saw her fingers pause when she reached my maiden name. "Do you recognize this amount?" she asked. "Yes, it matches the withdrawal from my mother's estate. And this transfer copy came from the same tin." "Yes." She studied it. "This appears to show estate funds moved into escrow for the Vermont property." My throat tightened. "So I'm not imagining it." Elaine looked up at me over her glasses. "No, Julia, you are not imagining it." I had not realized how desperately I needed someone outside my family to say that. Not comfort, not sympathy, just a clear line drawn between reality and Robert's fog. Elaine moved to my mother's letter next. As she read, her face softened. "Evelyn was careful," she said quietly. "Very careful. She wanted me to have the cabin. That is what this letter indicates. It may not be the only evidence, but it is powerful context." Then she reached the deed copy. The room changed. I could feel it. Elaine leaned closer. She pulled another document from a file cabinet behind her desk, an old scanned copy of a form my mother must have signed years ago. Then she asked me for my driver's license. I handed it to her. She laid 3 signatures side by side. My current license signature. A signature from an old estate acknowledgement form. The signature on the cabin document. "Julia," she said slowly. "Did you sign this?" I did not even need to look again. "No." "You're certain?" "Yes." Elaine turned the page slightly toward me. "Look at the J. Look at how it starts from the bottom instead of the top. Your natural signature begins high and moves down. This one is drawn slowly." See the hesitation? I stared. Now that she pointed it out, the falsehood seemed obvious. "And the R in Ross," she continued. "Yours connects. This one lifts. Whoever wrote it was copying the appearance of your name, not signing from habit." A chill moved through me. "You think someone forged it?" Elaine removed her glasses. "I think there is enough here to have a serious question about forgery, improper transfer, and possible misuse of estate-related authority." My hands folded together in my lap. "Robert said I don't understand legal documents." Elaine's face hardened in a controlled, professional way. "People who benefit from your confusion often work very hard to create it." I looked away before she could see tears gather. She did not rush me. After a moment, she asked, "Did Robert ever hold power of attorney for your mother?" "I don't know. Maybe briefly. She was sick. He helped with hospital bills. I remember signing some forms, but I don't know what they were." Elaine wrote something down. "We will need to check that. Your mother had limited estate documents in my office, but if Robert used any authority beyond what was granted, that matters. What happens now?" "Now," she said, "you stop confronting him alone. You do not sign anything. You do not discuss strategy with your son, yet if there is a chance Robert has already influenced him. You preserve every document and every message, and I will pull the property records from Vermont." My heart thudded. "Can we stop the sale? If there is an active closing and a legitimate ownership dispute, there are ways to slow or stop it. But we need facts quickly. Diana's involved." I heard that part. "She wants to buy it before I see the file." Elaine's eyes sharpened. "Then she may already know there is something in the file worth hiding." That thought sat heavily between us. Before I left, Elaine made copies of everything I had brought, created a file under my name, and gave me instructions written in neat block letters. "Do not sign. Do not threaten. Do not reveal all evidence. Communicate in writing when possible. Save voicemails and texts. Call if Robert pressures you." At the bottom, she wrote one more sentence. You are not confused. I stared at it longer than I should have. Elaine noticed. Keep that, she said. I folded the paper and placed it in my purse. As I stood to leave, she walked me to the door herself. Julia, she said your mother came to me because she wanted to protect you without humiliating you. She believed one day you might need proof more than advice. I swallowed hard. She knew Elaine did not answer directly. She was a woman who watched closely. Outside, the late morning sun was bright on the sidewalk. People passed carrying coffee folders, grocery bags. Ordinary life continuing as if mine had not split open. When I reached my car, I found 3 missed calls from Robert. 1 voicemail. I played it before starting the engine. His voice was calm. Too calm. Julia, wherever you are, come home. We need to talk before this gets worse. Michael is worried about you. I looked at the office building behind me, then at Elaine's handwritten note on the passenger seat. Michael is worried about you. So Robert had already begun. He had not called Michael to tell the truth. He had called him to build a case against me. I deleted nothing. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Sarah, and then sat very still behind the wheel. The war for the cabin was no longer only about property. Robert was preparing to take my credibility too. But this time I had walked into a lawyer's office with my mother's proof, and I had walked out with something Robert never expected me to find. A witness. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Robert had already changed the shape of the story. I could feel it before I even opened the front door. The house looked the same from outside. White siding, black shutters, maple tree casting late morning shadows across the walkway. But something had shifted. For 34 years, that house had been the place where I folded laundry, cooked Sunday dinners, wrapped Christmas gifts, and waited for people I loved to come home. Now, it felt like a place where evidence could disappear. I stepped inside quietly. Robert was in his study with the door half closed. He was speaking in that low, reasonable voice he used when he wanted other people to believe he was the calm one. I'm worried about her, he said. I stopped in the hallway. A pause. Then Robert continued. No, Michael, I'm not exaggerating. She followed me to Vermont. She tore up floorboards. She's convinced your grandmother left her some secret property scheme. My hand tightened around my purse. Secret property scheme. That was how quickly a mother's protection became a woman's delusion when Robert told it. He sighed into the phone. I know. She's your mother. I don't want to upset her either, but this has been building. She's forgetting conversations, misreading documents, accusing me of hiding things. Another pause. No, don't call her yet. It may agitate her more. I stood very still listening to my own son being guided away from me. That hurt more than I expected. Not because Michael believed him yet. I did not know that. But because Robert knew exactly which door to knock on first. Michael was practical, loyal to order, frightened of family embarrassment. If Robert planted the idea that I was becoming unstable, Michael would not see betrayal first. He would see a problem to manage, and I would become the problem. I walked into the kitchen, set my purse on the counter, and took out Elaine's handwritten note. You are not confused. I read it twice. Then I photographed it and sent it to Sarah. A few seconds later, she replied, Hold on to that, and hold on to yourself. I stood there longer than I should have, breathing through the ache in my chest. When Robert finally came out of the study, he looked unsurprised to see me. Where were you? He asked, with someone who understands documents. His eyes narrowed. Meaning I spoke to a lawyer. For the first time that day, his face changed. It was small, a tightening around his eyes, a shift in his mouth. Not fear exactly, but calculation interrupted. What lawyer one who knew my mother? He gave a short laugh. Elaine Porter. I had not said her name. That told me something too. You remember her, I said. Of course I remember her. She was an interfering old woman even then. She said the receipt matters. She would say that. Lawyers make money turning family misunderstandings into cases. And the bank transfer? He took a step closer. Julia, listened to me carefully. Your mother gave money to us, to our household. I made decisions with it. That is what husbands do when wives trust them to handle business. You told me the money was for repairs. It was used for family benefit. The receipt says Vermont property deposit. The cabin benefited the family. Then why did you call it yours for 34 years? He stared at me, and for a moment I saw the real answer sitting behind his eyes. Because he could. Because I let him. Because no one had stopped him before. Instead, he said, You're twisting language. No, I am finally hearing it. He shook his head as if I saddened him. That look used to break me. The disappointment. The weary patience, the suggestion that I was making him suffer by needing answers. But after Elaine's office, after my mother's letter, after hearing him tell Michael I was unstable, The look did not reach me the same way. I want all records related to the cabin, I said. You don't know what you're asking for. I know exactly what I'm asking for. No, he said sharply. You don't. The room went quiet. Then he softened again. Julia, I'm trying to protect you from stress. That cabin is tied up with loans, repairs, taxes, legal obligations. It's not as simple as an old receipt. My stomach tightened. Loans. He froze. I had not known until he said it. I watched his face close like a door. What loans, Robert? He looked away. I spoke generally. No. You said loans. You're doing it again. Doing what fixating? There it was. The new word for noticing. I did not argue. I picked up my purse. Where are you going now to find out what loans are tied to my cabin? His voice dropped. Do not walk out that door. I turned back. There are moments when a marriage reveals itself in one sentence, not because the sentence is new, but because you finally hear what has always lived beneath it. Do not walk out that door. Not please stay. Not let's talk. Not, I'm sorry. A command. I looked at him and said, watch me. Then I left. I did not go back to Elaine immediately. I went to the county records office first because Elaine had told me some property information could be accessed publicly, and I wanted to see what Robert thought I would never look for. The Vermont property records were not easy for me. The website was confusing, filled with parcel numbers, book references, mortgage entries, tax assessments, and documents that opened sideways on the screen. I sat in my car outside the public library with my laptop balanced on my knees, muttering like one of my second graders trying to sound out a hard word. But I kept going. I searched the cabin address, then the parcel number, then Robert's name, then mine. At first, nothing made sense. Too many dates, too many abbreviations. But then I saw an entry from 4 years earlier. Mortgage assignment, lender North County Credit Union, borrower Robert Allen Ross, secured property, Vermont Lake parcel. My mouth went dry. Borrower Robert Allen Ross. Not Julia. Not Julia and Robert. Robert alone had borrowed against the cabin. I clicked the document with shaking hands. The amount was large. Larger than any repair loan should have been. The purpose line was vague personal business consolidation. Personal business. Robert had retired from contracting years earlier. He had told everyone it was because his knees were bad, because the market changed, because younger men could climb ladders faster. But now I remembered late notices he had hidden in drawers, calls he took outside, a year when he insisted we tighten spending while refusing to explain why. I sent the document to Elaine. Then I found another entry. Modification agreement. Then another. Notice of delinquency later cured. My stomach rolled. He had nearly lost it before. My mother's cabin. My cabin. And I had been in New Hampshire baking pies for church fundraisers while Robert quietly borrowed against the one thing my mother had tried to protect. My phone rang. Elaine. Julia, she said, I just saw what you sent. I found a loan. Yes, and not a small one. Can he do that if the cabin wasn't really his? That depends on what the recorded title says and how it got that way. I'm pulling the full chain now. But Julia, there's something else. I closed my eyes. What? The loan appears connected to a business account. His old contracting business. Possibly. But there are transfers out to a payee I recognize from one of the documents you sent earlier. I felt cold before she said the name. Linda Harper. For a moment, the sounds outside the library faded. A child laughing near the entrance. Tires on pavement. A dog barking somewhere down the street. Linda Harper. Robert's bookkeeper. That was what he had called her years ago. She handled invoices, he said. Payroll. Tax forms. She was efficient, unmarried private. I had met her twice at company Christmas dinners. She was younger than Robert by at least 15 years with red hair, careful makeup, and a way of laughing at his jokes before he finished them. I had once asked if she worked too closely with him. Robert had looked offended for 2 full days. I employ a capable woman and you turn it into jealousy, he had said. So I apologized. Of course I apologized. What transfers, I asked Elaine. I don't want to jump ahead without complete records, but there are payments that do not look like ordinary bookkeeping fees. My hand went to my forehead. How long I don't know yet. The shame came back hot and bitter. Not just because there may have been another woman. Not even because money may have gone to her. Because suddenly I understood the cruelty of it. Robert had not only taken my mother's gift and called it his. He may have used it to prop up a secret life while telling me I was too emotional to understand business. Elaine's voice softened. Julia, listen to me. Do not confront him about Linda yet. I don't know if I can look at him. Then don't. Go somewhere safe if you need to. Sarah, a hotel a friend. I thought of Robert at home, already calling Michael, already shaping my children's view before I could speak. No, I said. If I leave, he controls the house and the story. Then document everything. And please be careful. I promised her I would. But careful is a strange word when your life is already on fire. That evening, Robert acted as if nothing had happened. He grilled chicken. He asked whether I wanted iced tea. He mentioned the weather. He moved around our kitchen like a man confident the walls still belonged to him. I watched him from the table. Finally, he said, "Michael may stop by tomorrow." "I'm sure he may. He's concerned." "Did you tell him about the loan Robert's hand stopped over the serving dish?" "What loan?" "The one against the cabin." His face hardened. "You had no right searching records. They're public. You don't understand what you found." I almost smiled. "Then explain it." He said nothing. So I asked the question I had not planned to ask yet. "Who is Linda Harper to you now?" The color drained from his face so fast that I knew Elaine was right before Robert said a word. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You need to stop digging before you destroy this family." I looked at him across the table at the husband who had buried my mother's truth beneath a floorboard and my own voice beneath years of doubt. "No, Robert," I said. "I think this family was destroyed by what you buried." That night, I did not sleep in the guest room. I did not sleep at all. Robert went upstairs after my question about Linda Harper and did not come back down. I heard water running in the bathroom, the closet door sliding open, the low thump of his dresser drawer. Ordinary sounds. Married sounds. The sounds of a man moving through a house as if nothing in it had changed. But everything had changed. I sat at the dining room table with my laptop, my phone, Elaine's handwritten instructions, and a yellow legal pad I had found in the kitchen drawer. I wrote one word at the top of the first page. Evidence. For most of my life, I had kept recipes, birthday cards, grocery lists, school calendars, thank you notes, and church potluck reminders. I knew how to preserve things that mattered emotionally. Now I had to learn how to preserve things that mattered legally. The first item was the receipt. I wrote originals secured at bank, photos sent to Sarah, copies sent to Elaine, then the bank transfer, then my mother's letter, then the deed with the strange signature, then Diane's text, then Robert's voicemail saying Michael was worried about me, then the public record loan, then the mention of Linda Harper. Each line felt like a nail being placed carefully into a wall one by one, strong enough to hang the truth. At nearly midnight, my phone buzzed. "Sarah, are you okay?" I looked toward the stairs before replying. "I'm okay. He's upstairs." Her response came almost immediately. "Do you want me to drive down tonight?" "No. Stay where you are. I'll tell you if I need you." "Mom, this is bigger than the cabin." I stared at that sentence for a long time. She was right. The cabin was the object, the proof, the battlefield. But the wound beneath it was deeper. Robert had taken something my mother meant for me and folded it into his own story until even I believed I was only a visitor in my own inheritance. And now, when the truth had finally surfaced, he was not sorry. He was strategic. I typed back, "I know." Then I added, "I'm going to do this carefully." Sarah replied, "Then I'll be careful with you." I pressed the phone against my chest. In the morning, Robert acted polite. That frightened me more than anger would have. He came downstairs in gray slacks and a pale blue shirt, freshly shaved, smelling of aftershave and coffee. He nodded at me as if we were distant acquaintances sharing a breakfast room at a hotel. "I have a meeting today," he said. "With whom?" He poured coffee. "Business." "What kind of business?" His mouth twitched. "The kind that doesn't require interrogation." I held his gaze. "The cabin." He set the pot down a little too hard. "Julia, I am not doing this with you before breakfast. You don't have to. But I'm not signing anything. I didn't ask you to. Not yet." For 1 second, the polite mask slipped. Then he smiled. "You really have gotten dramatic." I almost answered. Instead, I picked up my mug and took a sip of coffee. Silence, I was learning, could be more useful than defense. Robert watched me for a moment, then took his phone from the counter and stepped into the study. This time, I did not stand in the hallway. I had already begun recording on my phone, not secretly inside his private space, but openly from where I sat in the dining room after he left, the door cracked. Elaine had told me to learn my state's recording rules before using anything formally, but she had also said memory notes made immediately after conversations could help. So I listened, then wrote. I heard him say Diana's name, then Mark, then, "She found copies, not originals. He was wrong. She's rattled, but she doesn't know the loan structure." Wrong again. "I can still get her to sign if Michael is there." My hand stopped moving. There it was. Not persuade, not explain. Get her to sign. Robert lowered his voice after that, but I caught one more sentence. "If we delay past Friday, Linda becomes a problem." I wrote it down exactly. If we delay past Friday, Linda becomes a problem. After Robert left the house, I waited 10 minutes, then walked into his study. I did not touch his locked drawers. I did not force anything open. I did exactly what Elaine had told me: collect what was in plain view photograph, what seemed relevant, and do not destroy or remove his property. On the desk was a folder labeled Doc Estimate. Inside, there was no doc estimate. There was a printed email from Mark Ellison, the real estate agent, confirming the closing appointment at a title company in Burlington. Friday at 2 p.m., Diane Ross was listed as buyer. Robert Ross was listed as seller. There was a line for spousal acknowledgement. Spousal acknowledgement. My body went cold. He did need my signature. Maybe not as owner, maybe not in the way I thought, but enough that he wanted Michael there to pressure me. Enough that Diane had texted him not to let me see anything until afterward. Enough that Robert was still trying to control the clock. I took photos of every page. Behind the email was another sheet projected payoff amounts. North County Credit Union, a contractor supply account, a private promissory note, and one line that made my stomach twist. LH settlement repayment. Linda Harper, not bookkeeping, not payroll. A repayment. I photographed that too. Then I put everything back exactly as I had found it. My next stop was the copy shop. The same young man from the day before recognized me and smiled kindly, though he looked curious when I placed another stack of documents on the counter. More scans, he asked. Yes, please. Same email. I hesitated, then said, 2 emails this time. I sent copies to Elaine and Sarah. Then, after standing there for a moment with my finger hovering over the screen, I sent a copy to myself under a new email folder labeled cabin. That word nearly made me cry. Not Robert's cabin. Not the family cabin. Cabin. Mine, maybe. If truth still meant anything. Elaine called within an hour. Julia, the closing documents matter, she said. I thought so. They are moving quickly. Too quickly. Can they sell it without me? Maybe not cleanly, depending on what title shows and what spousal or marital rights are involved, but speed is often used to make people sign before they understand. That's what he's doing. Yes. Her voice became firmer. I am drafting a notice to Mark Ellison and the title company. We will not reveal everything yet, but we will inform them there is a serious ownership and signature dispute involving the property. That should make any careful professional pause. Will Robert know? Soon. I looked out the copy shop window at cars passing in the sun. Good. Elaine was quiet for a moment. That is a brave answer. No, I said. I'm scared. Bravery is often fear that decides to behave with dignity. I wrote that sentence down later. When I returned home, Robert's truck was still gone. I used the quiet to make a timeline. Elaine had suggested it dates events, documents, witnesses. It sounded simple, but building it nearly broke me. Year my mother got sick. Date estate was finalized. Date of withdrawal. Date cabin receipt was issued. Date Robert first began calling the cabin his. Date of the suspicious deed. Dates of loans. Date of Diane's messages. Date of the upcoming closing. Seeing the years lined up was different from remembering them. Memory lets you soften things. A timeline does not. A timeline showed me how long Robert had benefited from my uncertainty. It showed me how a lie does not always arrive as one dramatic betrayal. Sometimes it comes in installments small enough to swallow until one day you realize you have digested a whole false life. At 4 o'clock, Michael called. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Hi, sweetheart. His voice was tense. Mom, what's going on? The word sweetheart caught in my throat. He was 41 years old, a father himself, but I still remembered him at 6 running across the yard with untied shoes. What did your father tell you? I asked. He said you're upset about the cabin. I am. He said you've been acting unlike yourself. There it was. Robert's seed already planted. I closed my eyes. Michael, I need you to listen carefully. I am not confused. I am not forgetting things. I found documents showing my mother's inheritance paid for the cabin. He sighed. Not cruelly. Wearily. Mom, Dad said Grandma helped both of you years ago. That doesn't mean I have the receipt. A pause. What receipt? The purchase receipt. With my name on it. My maiden name. I also have the bank transfer from Grandma's estate and a letter she wrote to me. Another pause. This one longer. Why didn't Dad mention that? My heart ached. I think you know why. Mom, he is trying to sell the cabin to Diane on Friday. What? He didn't tell you that either, no? He said he was considering options. I laughed softly, but without humor. Closing is Friday at 2. Michael went quiet. For the first time, I heard uncertainty in his silence. Your father may ask you to come here, I said. He may ask you to help convince me to sign something. Before you agree, ask him to show you the closing email. Ask him about North County Credit Union. Ask him about Linda Harper. Linda, he said. From his old office. Yes. What does she have to do with this? I don't know all of it yet, but I know enough to stop signing blindly. Michael breathed into the phone. I need to talk to Dad. I know. But Michael, yeah, talk to him as a man if you need to. But do not forget, I am your mother, not a problem your father handed you to solve. He did not answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, Okay. After we hung up, I sat there with tears in my eyes, not because Michael believed me fully, but because for the first time, Robert's version had cracked before it hardened. That evening, Robert came home angry. Not loud. Not yet. But his face was stiff and he carried his phone like a weapon. You called Michael, he said. Yes. You had no right dragging him into this. I looked up from the timeline spread across the table. You dragged him first. His eyes dropped to the papers. What is all this, a timeline? Of what? Your lies. He stepped toward the table. I placed my hand flat over the papers. Don't. Something in my voice stopped him. For a few seconds, we stared at each other across 34 years of marriage and 3 feet of polished wood. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. I saw Diane's name on the screen. Robert read the message and the color rose in his neck. What did you do? He whispered. I did not know yet. Then my own phone rang. Elaine, I answered on speaker. Julia, she said calmly, Mark Ellison's office has acknowledged receipt of our notice. The title company has been informed not to proceed without resolving the ownership dispute. Robert's face went still. Elaine continued, Do not sign anything, and do not give Robert the originals. I looked directly at my husband. I won't. Robert turned and walked out of the room without a word, but this time his silence did not control me. This time it told me something wonderful. He was losing time. Robert did not come back to the dining room for almost an hour. I heard him in his study speaking in quick, clipped sentences behind the closed door. Once his voice rose just enough for me to catch Diane's name. Another time I heard the words family meeting and something inside me went cold. Family meeting. In the Ross family, that phrase had never meant everyone was equal. It meant Robert had already decided what the family should think, and he wanted witnesses. When he finally returned, he looked composed again. That was one of the most frightening things about Robert. His anger never stayed messy for long. He folded it neatly, tucked it behind a calm face, and presented it as concern. Michael thinks we should all sit down together, he said. Does he? Yes, tomorrow evening at his house. I looked up from the timeline I was still organizing. Who is all? He hesitated just long enough. Michael. Karen. Sarah, if she insists on coming. Diane may stop by since this involves her too. I almost laughed. Diane may stop by. She is part of the transaction. She is part of the problem. Robert's eyes hardened. That attitude is exactly why we need everyone in one room. No, I said. You want everyone in one room because you think I'll be easier to corner there. He leaned both hands on the back of a dining chair. Julia, listen to yourself. Corner, lies, evidence. You're talking like I'm your enemy. I looked at him for a long moment. Aren't you? For once, he had no quick answer. The next evening, I drove myself to Michael's house. Robert wanted us to go together, but I refused. That one small refusal seemed to irritate him more than it should have. Control is often revealed by the tiny freedoms it resents. Michael lived in a neat subdivision outside Manchester with his wife Karen and their 2 teenagers, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looked recently trimmed and every porch had a seasonal wreath. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, watching light glow through the front windows. I remembered Michael at 8 years old, standing in our kitchen with a scraped knee, insisting he did not need a bandage while tears streamed down his face. He had always wanted to be strong. Robert admired that. I had worried about it. Sarah arrived 2 minutes after I did. She got out of her car wearing dark jeans, a green sweater, and the serious expression she wore when she was trying not to cry. She hugged me before I reached the walkway. Are you okay? She whispered. No, I said, but I'm here. That counts. Inside the living room felt too warm. Karen had put out coffee, tea, and a plate of cookies no one touched. Michael stood near the fireplace with his arms crossed. Robert sat in the armchair like a man attending a meeting he had called. Diane was already there, of course, perched on the edge of the couch with a leather handbag in her lap and false sympathy arranged across her face. Julia, Diane said, I'm glad you came. I did not answer her. Sarah noticed. Her mouth twitched slightly, not quite a smile. Michael cleared his throat. Mom, Dad said things have gotten tense. That is one way to put it. Robert sighed. This is what I mean. I turned toward him. I have barely spoken. You don't have to. Your tone says enough. Sarah stepped closer to me. Michael raised a hand. Okay, let's not start like this. We're here because we all care about the family. Diane nodded quickly. Exactly. This cabin situation has become very emotional, and sometimes emotion clouds judgment. I looked at her. Did emotion tell you to text Robert not to let me see anything until after closing? The room went still. Diane's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. I have a photo. Robert leaned forward. Private messages taken out of context are not evidence of anything, Sarah said quietly. They are evidence of context. Robert's eyes snapped to her. Sarah, this is between your mother and me. No, she said. You invited Diane, Michael, and Karen. Don't pretend this is private now. Karen, who had been silent near the doorway, looked down at her hands. Michael rubbed his forehead. Mom, can we just slow down? Dad says the cabin sale is necessary because of financial obligations. Financial obligations he created without telling me. Robert's jaw tightened. That is not accurate. Then explain North County Credit Union. Michael looked at Robert. Dad. Robert waved one hand. A business consolidation loan from years ago. It was handled. Secured by the cabin, I said. Diane cut in. Lots of people use property as collateral. That doesn't mean something sinister happened. You mean lots of people use other people's inheritance as collateral? Her lips pressed together. Michael looked at me. Mom. Dad says Grandma's money was mixed into marital assets. He said you both benefited from it. I opened my folder and removed a copy of the receipt. My mother's estate paid the property deposit. My name is on the receipt. My mother wrote me a letter saying the cabin was meant for me. Robert stood abruptly. That letter is sentimental, not legal. I looked up at him. You're very afraid of sentimental paper for a man who says it means nothing. Karen's eyes flicked toward me, then down again. Michael took the copy of the receipt. His expression changed as he read it. Julia Bennett Ross, he said softly. My name before your father made me feel foolish for remembering who I was. That hit him. I saw it in his face. Robert saw it too. Michael, he said your mother has been under a lot of stress. She's connecting things that don't belong together. Sarah's voice sharpened. Stop doing that. Robert turned. Excuse me. Stop making her sound unstable every time she makes a point you can't answer. Diane stood. This is disrespectful. Robert has carried this family for decades. I looked at her. And what exactly are you carrying, Diane? A bargain purchase you hoped to close before I learned the truth. Her face tightened. I offered a fair solution to a family burden. My mother's gift was not a burden. The room went quiet again. Michael sat down slowly, still holding the receipt. Then Robert changed tactics. He walked toward me, lowered his voice, and spoke gently as if I were a frightened child. Julia, I know this has stirred up grief about your mother. I should have handled that more sensitively. But dragging lawyers into old paperwork will cost money, divide the family, and hurt everyone. The best thing you can do is sign the acknowledgement, let the sale proceed, and we can resolve the rest privately. There it was. The whole reason for the meeting. Sign. Michael looked at me. What acknowledgement? Robert did not look at him. A routine document. Then show it to him, I said. Robert's face went still. Not here. Why not? Because this is becoming hostile. Sarah let out a bitter little laugh. It became hostile when you brought Mom here to pressure her. Michael stood now. Dad, do you have the document? Robert's eyes flashed. I didn't come here to be cross-examined by my son. No, Michael said slowly. You came here because you told me Mom was acting irrational. Robert said nothing. Michael looked at me, and for the first time in days, his face softened with something like shame. Mom, I didn't know about the receipt. I know. I didn't know there was already a closing date. I know that too. Diane grabbed her handbag. This is ridiculous. I will not sit here and be accused of theft because Julia suddenly found some old family papers. Sarah watched her closely. Then why were you worried about Mom seeing the file? Sarah asked. Diane froze near the doorway. Robert answered for her. Enough. But Diane had already looked at him. Just once. Fast. Guilty. Sarah saw it. I saw Sarah see it. The meeting broke apart after that. Diane left first, muttering about lawyers and ungrateful people. Robert followed her onto the porch, saying he needed to clear up this misunderstanding. Michael walked into the kitchen shaken. Karen followed him. For a moment, Sarah and I were alone in the living room. She leaned close and whispered, Don't leave yet. Why? Because they're talking outside. I looked toward the window. Sarah took out her phone, calm and quick. And the porch window is open. I did not stop her. A minute later, Robert's voice came faintly through the screen. You said she'd never find the receipt. Diane hissed. Because you told me it was gone. I told you Evelyn hid things. I didn't say I found everything. You promised this would be clean before closing. It would have been if Julia hadn't started digging. Then Diane said the sentence that made Sarah's hand tighten around the phone. She never even knew what she paid for Robert. You said so yourself. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she kept recording. Outside, Robert lowered his voice. Keep your mouth shut. If Julia proves that receipt connects to the estate account, we both have a problem. Sarah stopped the recording only when their footsteps moved off the porch. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she handed me the phone. My daughter's voice trembled when she finally said, Mom, I believe you. I looked down at the dark screen in her hand, then toward the porch where my husband and his sister had just buried themselves in their own words. For the first time since this began, I did not feel alone in the room. Sarah sent the recording to Elaine before we left Michael's house. She did it from the upstairs hallway, away from the kitchen where Michael and Karen were speaking in low voices, and away from the front porch where Robert had gone silent the moment he realized Diane had said too much. I stood beside my daughter beneath a framed school photo of my grandchildren and watched the file upload. For years, I had been the woman who packed leftovers after family dinners, the woman who remembered birthdays, the woman who reminded everyone to bring sweaters to outdoor events. Now I was standing in my son's hallway collecting audio evidence against my own husband and sister-in-law. There are moments in life when you do not feel brave or strong. You feel tired. You feel old. You feel like your hands should be holding something softer than proof. Sarah looked at me after the file sent. Mom, she whispered, you need to come home with me tonight. I shook my head. I can't. You can. If I leave now, Robert will say I ran because I'm unstable. Let him say it. He has said too much already. She took my hand. And you have proof now. I looked toward the staircase where voices drifted up from the kitchen. Michael's voice sounded strained. Karen's was gentler. Robert's voice was gone. Diane had left minutes earlier, and I could picture her in her car calling someone rewriting everything she had just said. I need one more thing, I told Sarah. What the power of attorney? Her eyes narrowed. What power of attorney? The one Elaine asked about. The one Robert may have used when Grandma was sick. Sarah's expression changed. She understood before I finished. You think that's how he got control? I think your grandmother trusted him when she was weak, and I think he turned that trust into a door. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. Then we find the door. Michael came upstairs a few minutes later. His face looked different from when I had arrived. Less certain, more human. In his hand, he held the copy of the receipt I had brought. Mom, he said quietly, can we talk? Sarah stepped back, but she did not leave. Michael noticed. I'm not going to attack her, Sarah. You already helped Dad do that before you knew the facts she said. He flinched. I touched her arm. It's all right. Michael looked down at the receipt. Dad said you were confused. He said you were making connections because of grief. I know. I should have asked you first. Yes, I said. He looked up and there was pain in his eyes. That pain did not erase what he had done, but it reminded me he was still my son. I'm sorry, he said. The words were simple. Not enough for everything, but enough for that moment. I nodded. I need more than an apology, Michael. I need you to stop letting your father define my reality before I speak. He swallowed. I understand. I was not sure he fully did, but he wanted to. That mattered. I asked him if he remembered anything from the year my mother died. Papers Robert handled, calls he took, trips to Vermont. Michael had been in college, then coming home on weekends, more focused on exams and his first serious girlfriend than family paperwork. Still, he remembered one thing. Dad had a locked briefcase, he said slowly. Brown leather. He used to take it to the hospital when Grandma was there. I thought it was for work. My heart began to pound. Did he keep it? I don't know. Maybe in the attic. He used to store old business stuff up there. At home. Of course. Robert's locked desks were not the only places proud men hid things. Sometimes they hid things where they assumed no woman would climb. The drive back to our house felt longer than usual. Robert drove ahead alone. I followed in my car and Sarah followed me. Michael offered to come too, but I told him to stay with Karen and the children. I did not want another confrontation that night. I wanted quiet access to a memory Robert might have forgotten. When we arrived, Robert walked straight inside without waiting for me. Sarah parked behind me. I'm coming in, she said. I did not argue. Inside, Robert stood in the foyer, his coat still on. So now Sarah is staying, he asked. For a while, I said. This is my home too. Sarah looked directly at him. Then act like someone who doesn't have to hide things in it. His face darkened. Be careful how you speak to me. No, she said. You be careful how you speak to my mother. For a moment, I thought he might explode. But Robert, as always, measured the room. He saw Sarah's phone in her hand. He saw me standing straighter than I had in years. He saw perhaps the beginning of consequences. He took off his coat slowly. "I'm going to bed," he said. "Good," I answered. He paused at the stairs as if expecting me to soften the word. I did not. When his bedroom door closed, Sarah and I stood in the hallway without speaking. Then she pointed upward. "The attic." I nodded. The pull-down attic stairs were in the hallway near the linen closet. I had not opened them in years. Robert always said there was nothing up there but insulation, old tools, and boxes of tax records. The cord scratched my palm as I pulled it down. The ladder unfolded with a metallic groan that seemed too loud in the sleeping house. Sarah went first, using her phone flashlight. "Careful," I whispered. She looked down at me. "Mom, I catalog fragile historical newspapers for a living. I can handle an attic." Despite everything, I almost smiled. The attic smelled of dust, cardboard, and heat trapped from many summers. Boxes were stacked beneath the slanted roof. Old Christmas decorations, paint cans, a broken fan, Robert's contractor files in gray plastic bins, and near the far wall beneath a tarp was a brown leather briefcase. My breath caught. Sarah saw my face. "That's it." "I think so." The briefcase was stiff with age, its brass locks tarnished. It was not locked anymore, or maybe one latch had broken. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside were folders, hospital billing papers, copies of checks, a worn notepad in Robert's handwriting, and a document titled Limited Power of Attorney. My mother's name was at the top. Evelyn Bennett. I sat back on my heels, suddenly dizzy. Sarah unfolded the document and read silently, her face growing harder with every line. "What does it say?" I asked. "It gave Dad authority to help pay medical bills and manage certain estate-related expenses while Grandma was undergoing treatment." "That sounds normal." "It was limited," Sarah said. "Very limited. And look," she pointed to the date, "it expired 90 days after execution unless renewed in writing." I leaned closer. 90 days. The cabin deed with the strange signature had been modified almost 7 months later. 7 months. Long after any limited authority expired. My hand went to my mouth. "He used it anyway," I whispered. "Or used the existence of it to make people believe he had authority." Sarah continued sorting. In the next folder, she found a copy of a letter from Elaine's old office addressed to my mother, confirming the intended purchase arrangement. Another page listed Robert as document courier, not decision maker. There was also a sticky note in his handwriting attached to a photocopy of my mother's "ID need J" signature after Evelyn passes. J. Julia. My name reduced to one letter in a plan. Sarah photographed everything. I called Elaine even though it was late. She answered with a voice that told me she had not been sleeping much either. "We found the power of attorney," I said. "Read me the expiration clause." Sarah did. Elaine was quiet for a moment. "That is important." "There's more," I said, and told her about the sticky note. Elaine exhaled slowly. "Julia, preserve those documents exactly where they are for now. Photograph them, but do not remove anything tonight unless you fear destruction. Tomorrow we will discuss formal retrieval. Robert is in the house. Then do not let him know you found them." I looked at Sarah. Too late for innocence, but not too late for strategy. We replaced everything in the briefcase exactly as we found it and climbed down from the attic. At the bottom of the ladder, I turned and saw Robert standing at the end of the hallway. He was in his robe. His face was pale. Neither of us spoke. His eyes moved from me to Sarah to the attic stairs. Then very quietly he said, "You should have left the past alone." I felt my mother's letter in my mind like a hand at my back. "No," I said. "You should have." Robert's words stayed in the hallway long after he said them. "You should have left the past alone." He stood at the far end of the hall in his robe, one hand resting on the banister, his face half-shadowed by the small nightlight plugged into the wall. For 1 second he looked older than I had ever seen him. Not weak, not sorry, just exposed. Sarah moved closer to me. "Dad," she said carefully. What exactly should she have left alone? Robert's eyes did not leave mine. "Things people your age don't understand." Sarah gave a small, humorless laugh. "There it is again." His jaw tightened. "This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, if you're trying to make my mother look unstable so you can sell something that may belong to her." "May," he repeated. "That word matters." "So does fraud," Sarah said. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Robert looked at her then, and for the first time I saw something close to hatred flicker across his face. Not because Sarah had insulted him, because she had named the thing he had spent years dressing in better words. "Fraud." He took one step forward. "You're making accusations you can't take back." I stepped in front of Sarah before I even thought about it. "No, Robert. We're asking questions you can't keep dodging." His eyes dropped to me and the old instinct rose in my body. The instinct to soften, to lower my voice, to smooth the room before the children saw too much. But Sarah was no longer a little girl, and I was no longer willing to protect Robert from the sound of his own choices. "We found the limited power of attorney," I said. His expression went still. "It expired before the cabin documents were changed." He said nothing. "And there's a note in your handwriting," I continued. "Need Jay's signature after Evelyn passes." His face paled. Sarah lifted her phone. "We photographed everything." For a moment he looked at the attic ladder as if calculating whether he could still climb up and destroy what remained. Then he looked back at us and did something I had not expected. He smiled. Not warmly, not confidently, cruelly. "You think old paper proves intent?" he asked. "You think a scribbled note means anything? Julia, your mother was sick. She was confused near the end. You were overwhelmed. I kept the family moving while you cried in hospital bathrooms." The words hit where he intended them to. Because I had cried in hospital bathrooms. I had cried where my mother could not see me. I had cried into paper towels under fluorescent lights, then washed my face and walked back into her room with a smile I hoped looked brave. Robert had seen that, and all these years later, he used it as evidence against me. My voice shook when I answered, but it did not break. "Yes," I cried. "That doesn't mean I gave you permission to steal from me." He flinched just a little. The next morning, Elaine asked us to come to her office. Not just me, Sarah too. Michael wanted to come after Sarah told him about the attic, but Elaine advised against turning the first legal review into another family confrontation. He sent me a message instead. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what to believe about Dad anymore, but I believe you deserve answers." It was not perfect, but it was a start. Elaine's office felt different the second time. Less like shelter, more like command. She had already printed the photographs Sarah sent, arranged them in labeled stacks, and pulled property records from Vermont. Melissa brought coffee, then quietly closed the door. Elaine began with the power of attorney. This document gave Robert limited authority to assist Evelyn Bennett with medical billing and specific estate expenses during a defined period, she said. It did not give him authority to redirect assets for his own benefit. It did not give him indefinite control. And it appears to have expired months before certain cabin-related documents were altered. I sat very still. Sarah reached over and placed her hand over mine. Elaine continued. "The receipt, the bank transfer, Evelyn's letter, and now this expired power of attorney form a pattern. Alone, each document might be argued away. Together, they raise serious questions. What about the signature Sarah asked?" Elaine slid the deed copy forward. "I am not a handwriting expert, but I know enough to say this should be reviewed by one. Julia denies signing it. The signature differs from known examples, and Robert had motive, opportunity, and access." Motive. Opportunity. Access. Words I had heard on television suddenly sitting at the same table as my marriage. Elaine turned to another stack. Now the loan. North County Credit Union accepted the cabin as collateral based on the recorded ownership documents. If those documents were produced through misrepresentation or forgery, the loan becomes complicated. That is why Robert wants a fast sale. A clean buyer, especially a family buyer, could help him pay off obligations and make the paper trail harder to challenge later. "And Diane," I asked. Elaine's mouth tightened. The recording suggests she knew Julia's lack of knowledge was part of the plan. Her words are not a full confession, but they are useful. Sarah's phone sat on the desk between us. Elaine had already listened to the porch recording 3 times. Each time I felt the same chill when Diane said she never even knew what she paid for. Some sentences cannot be unheard. Then Elaine looked at me. "Julia, I have requested a meeting today with Mark Ellison and the title company representative. Robert and his counsel may attend if he chooses to bring one. This will not be a courtroom, but it will put everyone on notice. Do I have to speak? You can speak as much or as little as you want. I will handle the legal points." I looked down at my hands. They looked older to me that morning. Blue veins, thin skin, a small scar near my thumb from when I cut myself peeling apples for Thanksgiving years ago. Hands that had packed school lunches, held feverish foreheads, written lesson plans, signed birthday cards. Hands that Robert assumed could sign away the truth if enough people pressured me. "I want to say one thing," I said. Elaine nodded. "Then say it clearly." The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. Robert arrived at Elaine's office at 2:58. He brought no attorney. That surprised Elaine, though she did not show it. Later, I understood why. Robert had spent so many years solving problems with confidence and intimidation that he still believed paperwork would bend if he spoke firmly enough. Mark Ellison arrived with a leather portfolio and nervous eyes. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, clean-shaven, with the polished look of a man who preferred friendly transactions and easy commissions. With him came a title company representative named Patricia Nolan, a serious woman in a navy blazer who carried a thick folder and did not smile unnecessarily. Robert walked in as if he owned the room. Then he saw Sarah sitting beside me. His expression soured. "Why is she here?" Elaine answered before I could. "Because Julia requested her presence. This is not a family therapy session." "No," Elaine said. "It is a discussion about a disputed property transaction." Patricia Nolan opened her folder. "And to be clear, my company will not proceed with closing while material questions remain about authority consent or title." Robert turned toward her. "There are no material questions. My wife is confused." My body tightened. Elaine's pen stopped moving. Sarah's eyes flashed. Patricia looked directly at me. "Mrs. Ross, are you confused about your objection to this sale?" I lifted my head. "No. Are you willing to sign any acknowledgement allowing the sale to proceed at this time?" "No." "Have you retained Ms. Porter to represent your interests?" "Yes." Patricia turned back to Robert. "Then she is not merely confused, Mr. Ross. She is represented." The sentence landed with quiet force. Robert's face reddened. Mark Ellison shifted in his chair. "Robert, you told me this was a routine spousal issue." "It is," Robert snapped. Elaine slid copies of the receipt and bank transfer across the table. "This receipt shows the property deposit paid by Julia Bennett Ross. This transfer connects that payment to Evelyn Bennett's estate account. We also have a letter indicating Evelyn intended the cabin for Julia." Robert waved a hand. "Sentimental material," Elaine added the deed copy. "My client denies signing this document. We have concerns about the signature." Patricia leaned forward. Robert's voice rose. "This is absurd. Julia signed dozens of things back then. She doesn't remember half of them." I felt everyone look at me. This was the moment he had always counted on. The moment where my uncertainty, my age, my grief, my gentleness would become his shield. I opened my folder and took out Elaine's handwritten note. "You are not confused." I placed it beside my mother's letter. Then I looked at Robert. "For 34 years you told me I didn't understand. You told me papers were too complicated, money was too stressful, and decisions were safer in your hands. But I understand this receipt. I understand my mother's handwriting. I understand my own signature well enough to know when it isn't mine. And I understand why you wanted me quiet." No one moved. Robert's mouth tightened. "Julia," I did not let him finish. "How many years did you think I would stay invisible?" The question seemed to empty the air from the room. Robert looked away first. That was when I knew. Not legally, not completely, not in a way that ended everything that afternoon, but in the deeper place where a wife knows when the lie has finally run out of breath. Patricia closed her folder. "The closing will not proceed," she said. Mark Ellison looked pale. Elaine sat back calm as stone. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. And Robert, for the first time since I had found the receipt, had nothing left to say that anyone in the room believed. The closing was supposed to happen Friday at 2 o'clock. Robert still went. That was the part I could not understand at first. After Elaine's notice, after Patricia Nolan had clearly said the title company would not proceed after Mark Ellison had seen the receipt, the bank transfer, the questionable signature, and my mother's letter, Robert still put on a suit Friday morning. A charcoal suit, a white shirt, a navy tie I had bought him for our 30th anniversary. He stood in front of the hallway mirror adjusting the knot as if he were going to a business luncheon, not walking into the wreckage of his own lies. I watched from the kitchen doorway. "You're really going?" I asked. He did not turn around. "This needs to be settled. It was settled yesterday." The closing was stopped. He smoothed the tie. "Elaine Porter doesn't have the authority to stop anything permanently." "No, but the truth does." That made him look at me. For a moment I saw pure exhaustion in his face. Not regret, not guilt. Exhaustion from being forced to keep too many stories straight. Then the mask returned. "You always did become poetic when you didn't understand business." The insult did not land the way it once would have. It passed through the room like smoke and disappeared. "I understand enough not to sign," I said. "You don't have to sign today." "Then why are you going?" His eyes held mine. "Because not everyone panics just because an old woman finds a box of papers." I almost smiled. Old woman. He meant it as a wound, but I had never felt clearer, steadier, or more present in my own life. "Be careful, Robert," I said softly. "Sometimes old women keep receipts." His face tightened. Then he left. Elaine had expected this. She called me 10 minutes after Robert's truck pulled away. "He may try to pressure Mark or the title company in person," she said. "He may bring Diane. He may claim the dispute has been exaggerated. What do? We go too." So at noon, Sarah arrived at my house. She brought a dark blazer for me, though I had not asked. She said, You taught me that when you're scared, you dress like you know where you're going. I put it on over a pale blue blouse. Then I took my mother's letter from the folder and read the last line again. I am leaving you this place, so you always remember you have the right to take those pieces back. I folded it carefully and placed it in my purse. The title company was in Burlington, Vermont, in a modern brick building with glass doors and potted plants beside the entrance. It was the kind of place designed to make large transactions feel ordinary. Clean floors, soft lighting, framed landscape photographs, a reception desk with a bowl of wrapped mints. But nothing about that afternoon felt ordinary. Elaine met us in the parking lot. She wore the same charcoal suit pearls and calm expression, but there was a sharper energy around her. She carried a slim leather briefcase, and when she saw me, she nodded once. You ready? No, I said. That's all right. Ready is not required. Present is enough. Sarah took my hand and the three of us went inside. The receptionist looked up. Her smile faltered when Elaine gave her name. Ms. Nolan is expecting you, she said. Of course she was. We were led to a conference room with a long table and large windows overlooking a parking lot. Robert was already there. So was Diane. Diane wore a cream pantsuit and gold earrings, her hair sprayed into place, her handbag sitting on the table like she intended to claim space. Mark Ellison sat near the far end, flipping through papers he clearly did not want to read. Patricia Nolan stood by a file cabinet, speaking quietly to another employee. When Robert saw me, his eyes hardened. Diane gave a little laugh. Well, she said Julia brought the cavalry. Sarah pulled out a chair for me. No, she said. She brought witnesses. Diane's smile vanished. Elaine set her briefcase on the table. Let the record be clear that my client objects to any closing transfer acknowledgement or settlement related to the property until the ownership dispute is resolved. Patricia nodded. Understood. As I stated yesterday, we are not closing today. Robert leaned forward. Then why are we here? Patricia looked at him. Because you insisted on appearing in person, Mr. Ross. And because Miss Porter requested that all parties receive the same written notice. Elaine removed several packets from her briefcase and passed them around. Robert did not touch his. Diane opened hers, read the first page, and went pale. What is this? She demanded. A formal notice of dispute, Elaine said. It includes documentation supporting Julia Ross's claim that the cabin was purchased with her separate inherited funds, that Evelyn Bennett intended the property for Julia, and that a key signature in the chain of title is contested. Robert said, contested by a woman who doesn't remember what she signed. Patricia looked at him sharply. Mr. Ross, I strongly suggest you stop characterizing your wife's mental state in this office. The room went quiet. Robert's face flushed. Mark cleared his throat. Robert, you told me your wife was aware of the sale. She was aware we were considering options, Robert said. No, I said. I was told after you had already arranged a closing. Mark looked deeply uncomfortable. Diane snapped, This is family drama. It has nothing to do with the transaction. Elaine turned toward her. You are the proposed buyer. You sent messages advising Robert not to let Julia see documents until after closing. You were recorded acknowledging Julia did not know what she had paid for. Diane's mouth opened, then closed. Robert's chair scraped back. That recording was private. Sarah said, So was Mom's inheritance. For 1 second, I thought Diane might slap the table. Instead, she turned to Patricia. You can't seriously believe this nonsense. Robert has maintained that cabin for decades. Julia barely went there. Because he kept me away, I said. Diane scoffed. Oh, please. You were never interested in hard things. You liked the porch, the lake, the sentimental little memories. Robert handled reality. There it was, the family myth in its purest form. Robert handled reality. I stood. My knees trembled, but I stood. No, Diane. Robert handled access. He handled papers. He handled explanations. He handled the story so well that even I started believing I was only allowed to love what he said belonged to him. No one interrupted. I looked at Robert. But love is not the same as ownership. Silence is not consent. And trust is not permission to steal. Robert stared at me, jaw clenched. Elaine placed the original receipt on the table inside a protective sleeve. Then the bank transfer. Then a certified copy of the limited power of attorney with its expiration date highlighted. Patricia leaned in. Mark looked at Robert. Diane stopped breathing for a moment. Elaine's voice was even. The payment code on the receipt matches the estate transfer. The transfer came from Evelyn Bennett's estate account for Julia's benefit. The limited power of attorney Robert relied upon had expired before later documents were altered. My client denies the signature. Until this is resolved, any sale would expose every party here to significant risk. Robert finally picked up his packet. He flipped through it quickly, too quickly to be reading. Then he looked at Mark. We had an agreement. Mark's face went pale. based on what you represented to me. I represented the truth. Patricia closed the master file. There will be no transaction today. Diane stood so fast her chair nearly tipped. I sold investments to make this purchase possible. Elaine looked at her. Then you should have asked why your brother was selling below market value to family in such a hurry. Diane's face twisted. And there it was. Not innocence, not confusion, anger at being caught too early. Robert turned toward me. For the first time that afternoon, his voice dropped. Julia, you don't know what you're doing. I looked at the receipt on the table at my mother's name preserved through bank records and careful paper at Sarah standing beside me at Elaine, calm and unmovable. Yes, I said, I'm stopping you. The words did not sound dramatic when I said them. They sounded simple. And sometimes simple truth is the loudest thing in a room full of lies. Patricia stamped the file with a red marker, hold title dispute. The sound of that stamp hitting paper was small, almost ordinary, but to me, it sounded like a door unlocking. After Patricia stamped the file, nobody moved for several seconds. Hold title dispute. 3 words in red ink. 3 words that did what my shaking voice had not been able to do for years. They stopped Robert. They stopped Diane. They stopped the quiet machinery of a transaction designed to make me disappear from my own story. Diane was the first to recover. This is outrageous, she said, grabbing her packet from the table. You are all overreacting to one bitter woman's fantasy. Sarah stood so quickly, her chair scraped the floor. Don't call my mother bitter. Diane turned on her. You don't know half of what your father has done for this family. Sarah's voice was cold. I'm starting to understand exactly what he did. Robert slammed his palm on the table. Enough! The sound made Mark Ellison flinch. Patricia Nolan's face tightened. Elaine did not move at all. Robert seemed to realize a second too late that he was no longer in our kitchen, no longer in Michael's living room, no longer surrounded by people trained to translate his anger into authority. He was in a professional office with witnesses who owed him nothing. He straightened his jacket. I apologize, he said stiffly. This has become emotional. No, I said. Every face turned toward me. This became honest. Robert's eyes narrowed. Julia, stop performing. That almost made me laugh. I had performed peace for 34 years. I had performed trust. I had performed confusion because it was easier for him when I doubted myself. The first time I spoke plainly, he called it performance. Elaine gathered the originals carefully and placed them back in her briefcase. Mr. Ross, she said. From this point forward, I recommend that any communication regarding the cabin go through counsel. I don't need counsel to speak to my wife. You may need counsel to protect yourself, Elaine replied. The sentence landed hard. Mark closed his portfolio. Robert, I have to withdraw from this transaction pending resolution. I can't be involved if there are questions of contested ownership or forged documents. Robert turned on him. You're walking away now. I'm protecting my license. Diane let out a sharp breath. Unbelievable. Patricia Nolan opened the door. This meeting is concluded. Just like that. The sale Robert had rushed, disguised, defended, and nearly forced into existence dissolved under fluorescent lights and legal caution. Outside the building, the Vermont air felt colder than it had that morning. Clouds had gathered over Burlington, and the wind moved through the parking lot in restless little gusts. Diane marched ahead of us, her heels striking the pavement like punctuation. Robert followed her. I thought they would leave separately. Instead, Diane spun around beside her car. You had no right humiliating us like that, she said to me. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Robert's younger sister. The woman who had spent decades making small comments about my place in the family. The woman who had smiled over Thanksgiving pies and then plotted to buy my mother's cabin at a discount. I humiliated you, I asked. You dragged private family matters into a business office. You tried to make my private inheritance disappear in a business office. Her mouth twisted. It was never just yours. My mother wanted it to be. Your mother was dying. The words came out cruel and quick. Sarah stepped forward, but I held up my hand. Diane had finally said what lived beneath all her politeness. My mother's illness to her was not a sorrow. It was an opportunity, a weakness in the paperwork, a soft place in the timeline where a determined man could put his hands where they did not belong. I walked closer to her. Do not speak about my mother as if her sickness made her wishes meaningless. For once, Diane looked uncertain. Robert stepped between us. Julia, enough. I looked at him. No, it has not been enough for a very long time. His face hardened. You think you've won something today? No, I said. I think I stopped losing. That silenced him. Elaine touched my arm gently. Julia, let's go. But before we could move, Diane said, Robert told me the cabin had become a burden. He said you didn't care about it except when you wanted to play victim. I turned back. And you believed him? Her eyes darted toward Robert. That small glance answered more than her mouth could. You knew, I said. Diane said nothing. You knew the cabin was tied to my mother's money. I knew Evelyn helped, she snapped. Everyone knew Evelyn helped. No, that is not what you said on the porch. You said I never knew what I paid for. Diane's face lost color. Sarah lifted her phone slightly. Not threatening, just reminding. Diane looked away. Robert's voice dropped. Diane, get in the car. She did. But before Robert followed, Elaine spoke. Mr. Ross, understand this clearly. Any attempt to destroy, alter, or remove documents related to the cabin, Evelyn Bennett's estate, the power of attorney, or the loan may create additional legal consequences. Robert's face was stone. Are you accusing me of something? Elaine looked at him steadily. I am preserving the record. On the drive home, Sarah sat beside me instead of following in her own car. I was grateful. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow as if the day had scooped something out of me. You did it, she said softly. No, I said. Your grandmother did. Elaine did. You did. And you. I looked out at the road ahead. Maybe. It is strange how hard it can be to give yourself credit for surviving something. Pain teaches humility, but betrayal teaches you to distrust even your own courage. I had spent so long being told I was delicate that standing up felt less like bravery and more like disobedience. When we reached my house, Robert's truck was not there. I was relieved for perhaps 10 seconds. Then fear returned. The attic, I said. Sarah understood immediately. We went inside quickly. The house was silent. Too silent. I pulled down the attic ladder and Sarah climbed up with her phone flashlight. I stood below listening to boxes shift. Mom, she called down. My stomach dropped. What? The briefcase is gone. For a moment I could not breathe. Of course. Of course Robert had gone straight for what remained. Sarah climbed down dusty and furious. He took it. I called Elaine. She answered before the first ring finished as if she had been expecting disaster. The briefcase is gone, I said. Did you photograph its contents? Yes. Good. Did Robert know it was there? He saw us coming down from the attic. Elaine was silent for a beat. Then his removing it after receiving notice may matter. What if he destroys it? He may, but destruction after notice can speak loudly. And we still have the photographs. I closed my eyes. Paper could disappear, but not all of it. Not anymore. That evening, Michael came to the house. He arrived alone. Robert still had not returned. Sarah stayed in the kitchen, giving us privacy without truly leaving me alone. Michael stood in the foyer holding his car keys, looking like a boy who had broken something valuable and did not know where to put his hands. Dad called me, he said. I'm sure. He said you and Sarah are trying to ruin him. I did not answer. He said Aunt Diane may lose money because of this. I looked at my son. And what did you say? Michael swallowed. I asked him why he went to the closing if it had already been stopped. My eyes filled. What did he say? He hung up. That was when the first tear fell. Not because everything was fixed, it was not. Not because Michael fully understood, he did not. But because a crack had opened in the wall Robert built between my son and me. Michael stepped forward. I should have believed you sooner. Yes, I said. He nodded, accepting it. I'm sorry. This time the apology sank deeper. He sat at the kitchen table with Sarah and me while I showed him the timeline. I watched his face change as dates became patterns. The estate, the receipt, the power of attorney, the suspicious signature, the loan, Linda Harper. Diane, the closing. When he reached Linda's name, he looked away. I remember her, he said. So do I. Dad said she was just the bookkeeper. Yes. Michael rubbed both hands over his face. What happens now, Elaine, helps me protect the cabin. Maybe more. I don't know yet. And Dad? I looked toward the empty driveway through the kitchen window. I don't know what happens to your father, but I know what will no longer happen to me. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Michael placed his hand over ours. It was awkward, painful, imperfect, but it was real. Robert came home after midnight. I was awake in the living room. Sarah had gone to the guest room. Michael had left around 10, shaken but kinder. I heard Robert's key turn in the lock, heard him step inside, heard him pause when he saw me sitting there with one lamp on. He looked tired, older, empty-handed. Where's the briefcase? I asked. He stared at me. What briefcase? And there it was again. The lie. Smaller now, weaker, almost pitiful. I stood. I have photographs. His jaw clenched. I have Elaine. His eyes darkened. I have Sarah. He looked away. And I have myself now, I said. That is the part you never planned for. Robert walked past me without a word. For the first time, his silence did not feel like punishment. It felt like surrender beginning. Robert moved out 3 days later. Not with shouting, not with apologies, not even with a final explanation. He packed 2 suitcases, several boxes from his study, and the framed contractor certificate that had hung behind his desk for years, like proof that he was a man people could trust. I watched from the kitchen window as he loaded his truck. For 34 years, I'd imagined that if Robert ever left me, I would collapse. I thought the silence would swallow me. I thought the empty side of the bed would feel like failure. But when his truck pulled away, all I felt at first was air. Not happiness, not victory. Air. The kind you take into your lungs after you have been holding your breath for so long, you forgot breathing was supposed to be natural. Elaine moved quickly after that. She filed the necessary notices, contacted the lender, preserved the title dispute, and requested documentation connected to the questionable signature and the old power of attorney. She told me the legal road would not be instant or simple. Nothing involving old property records, family money, and a husband determined to deny everything ever is. But the sale was stopped. The cabin was protected. And Robert no longer controlled the story alone. Diane disappeared into offended silence. For weeks, she sent messages through Michael, insisting she had only tried to help the family resolve a burden. I did not respond. Some lies do not deserve conversation. They deserve distance. Michael came by often that autumn. At first, he was awkward. He brought groceries I did not ask for. He fixed a loose cabinet handle that had been loose for 7 years. He asked if I needed help moving boxes, though I had not mentioned moving anything. I understood what he was doing. He was trying to apologize with usefulness because words still embarrassed him. One afternoon, he stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Mom, I should have known Dad was shaping what I thought." I was washing a mug. I turned off the water. "Yes," I said. "You should have." He nodded, eyes lowered. "I'm sorry." "I know." I believed him because it was easier. That was the first fully honest thing he said. I dried my hands slowly. People often believe the louder person because the quieter one has been trained not to defend herself. His eyes filled, and for a moment I saw my little boy again. "I don't want to be like him," he said. "Then don't confuse control with strength." Sarah helped me return to the cabin in October. The maples along the Vermont roads had turned red and gold, and the lake was cold and silver beneath a pale sky. We drove up in her car with boxes of cleaning supplies, fresh curtains, and one small blue ceramic bowl I found at an antique shop because Robert had taken my mother's. When I unlocked the cabin door, I stopped on the threshold. Sarah waited beside me. "You okay?" I looked into the little living room, the fireplace, the faded rug, the empty mantel. The place still carried sorrow, but it no longer felt stolen. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." We spent the day cleaning. We opened windows, shook dust from blankets, scrubbed the yellow kitchen cabinets, and rehung curtains in the small bedroom where I had found the tin. Sarah brought flowers and placed them on the mantel in the blue bowl. Then she handed me a small frame. Inside was a copy of my mother's final line, "You have the right to take those pieces back." I placed it beside the bowl. That evening after Sarah went to make tea, I walked alone to the back bedroom. The floorboard had been repaired properly now, but I still knew exactly where the secret had been hidden. I stood there for a long time. That receipt had not only saved a cabin, it had returned my name to me. Julia Bennett Ross. A woman before marriage. A wife during marriage. A mother through all of it. But most of all, a person with memory rights and a voice. I did not hate Robert in that moment. Hate would have tied me to him too tightly. What I felt was grief, and beneath grief, release. Later, Sarah and I sat on the screened porch, wrapped in sweaters, watching fog settle over the lake. "What will you do with it?" she asked. "The cabin?" She nodded. I looked out at the water. "I'm going to keep it. As a home. As a reminder." Sarah smiled softly. In the weeks that followed, I began spending weekends there. Sometimes Sarah came. Sometimes Michael did with his children. The first time my grandchildren ran down to the dock laughing, I cried quietly into my coffee. Not because everything was fixed, but because something beautiful had survived. Michael noticed the tears. "Too much?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just enough." Robert and I separated formally before winter. Elaine recommended another attorney for the divorce and financial matters. There were debts to untangle, accounts to review, and signatures to challenge. Linda Harper's name appeared in places I wished it had not. Robert denied what he could and minimized what he could not. But I no longer needed his confession to believe my own evidence. That was freedom too. On the first snowfall of the season, I drove to the cabin alone. The road was quiet. The trees were bare. The lake looked dark and still with snow gathering along the dock and porch railing. I carried a bag of groceries inside, made tea, and lit the wood stove after 3 failed attempts and one word my mother would have pretended not to hear. Then I sat at the kitchen table with the original receipt in front of me. Elaine had returned it after making certified copies. It was now protected in a clear sleeve, fragile but whole. I touched my name through the plastic. For years, Robert had said the cabin was his burden, his sacrifice, his decision. But the receipt told a quieter truth. It said my mother loved me enough to plan for a day I could not imagine. It said the past had not been silent. It had been waiting. It said even a buried truth can rise when someone finally gets down on her knees and pulls up the floorboard. I looked around the cabin. The yellow cabinets, the old windows, the little porch, the room where my mother had once slept, the lake beyond the glass. Mine was not the word that mattered most anymore. Safe was. And for the first time in many years, so was I. Sometimes the truth does not arrive as a shout. Sometimes it waits quietly inside a drawer under a floorboard, inside an old receipt, or in the handwriting of someone who loved us enough to protect us before we knew we needed protecting. Julia's story reminds us that betrayal is not always loud at first. It can come disguised as concern, as I'll handle it, as you wouldn't understand, as years of being made to feel smaller inside your own life. But this story is also a reminder that no one is too old to reclaim their voice. No woman becomes invisible just because someone stops seeing her. No marriage, no family title, no shared history gives another person the right to bury your truth, your dignity, or what was meant for you. Love should never require silence. Trust should never be used as a weapon. And peace is not real peace if it only exists because one person is afraid to ask questions. Julia did not win because she wanted revenge. She won because she finally believed the evidence of her own life. She listened to the quiet warning inside her. She protected what her mother left behind, but more importantly, she protected the part of herself that had been dismissed for too long. Healing did not mean pretending the betrayal never happened. Healing meant standing in the cabin, breathing freely, and knowing she no longer needed permission to belong. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Julia's place? Have you ever had to fight to prove a truth someone tried to bury? Please share where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if emotional family stories like this speak to you, please subscribe and join us for the next one.